Number 10. Draculina. To be clear, when we talk about heroes you've never heard of, we're more talking about those that sit on the outskirts of the superhero fandoms, so you won't find them likely on the big screen or on DC's or Marvel's main teams like the Justice League, Avengers, or the X-Men. Instead, these are heroes who come from a more humble background by comparison. Some of them may have been simply forgotten due to just how long they've been around, whereas others typically are associated with smaller or even in some cases now defunct publishers. Coming from the world of fellow indie hero Vampirella, Draculina is sort of Ella's adopted sister and also kind of her ex-lover or ex-one-night stand. There have actually been at least 2 different Draculinas, possibly 3 at this point. One is Lilith's biological daughter and the biological twin sister of Vampy, who is blonde. The other one, the one I'm focusing on, who was once Vampy's lover, became obsessed with her and was eventually adopted by Lilith to become the new Draculina. If you want to learn more about her and other Vampy adjacent characters, Sacred 6 is a pretty cool comic that I would recommend that you check out. Or you can learn more about this version of Draculina in the 2019 Vampirella series from Dynamite. Both of those series, by the way, are by Christopher Priest. Both Draculinas go by the name Victory, although the one we're talking about here was originally named Victoria, but the two do differ in terms of appearance and, like I said, blood relation. Blood relation in this context almost becomes a vampire pun. This new Draculina isn't exactly a vampire, by the way, but is armed with a demonic ring that basically grants her powers similar to one, allowing her to accurately play the part. Draculina is currently a property of Dynamite Comics. Number 9. Tony Chu. Tony Chu is a quirky and unique character, but still is ultimately a hero, and even technically has superpowers, so he would qualify as a superhero. Tony is a detective who possesses the unique power of sebopathy. Whatever he eats, except for beets, he gains in-depth knowledge of, being able to tell where all the ingredients that make it up came from, being able to taste everything about that ingested food. Tony uses this skill to basically solve murders mainly, sometimes even ingesting parts of victims or the accused, sometimes even ingesting parts of the victims or the suspects to learn more about the case and help solve it. He initially worked for the Philadelphia Police Department, but ultimately gets fired after they witness him eating part of a deceased suspect. He later is hired by the FDA. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, there are actually a lot more indie superheroes that I would love to tell you about as we dive into the world of unknown supers. So if you want to learn more, be sure to let us know by commenting below and giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Red Sonja. One of my favorite lesser known heroes is Red Sonja. Red Sonja comes to us from the less sci-fi, more fantasy based world of sword and sorcery. She is an extremely gifted fighter, marksman, and sword bearer. Red Sonja, the she-devil, is said to have been given her name for, well, many different reasons. One such story as to how she got her name is that she left to seek out adventure and her fortune and became a mercenary, earning the name Red because of all the blood that she spilled. Red Sonja, while not a traditional hero, pretty much always stands up to those who are cruel and corrupt, often fighting for those who are oppressed, even against her better judgment. She has even fought death before in combat and won, allowing her to live on when she was on the brink of death. Red Sonja was once a character from the Marvel Comics wheelhouse, but currently calls Dynamite Comics her home. Number 7. Vampirella, but you can call her Vampy. Vampirella isn't a conventional hero by any means, but she definitely tries to do what's best by folks while still being a vampire from outer space, and at the same time with ties to Lilith and Hell. Overall, she's both complicated and also kinda super simple, and it's that weird blend of those two very different elements that I love about her. Vampy, being an intergalactic vampire, is super strong, fast, can fly because she actually has wings, and also has been shown to have access to advanced technology at times due to her ties to the planet Draculon. Vampirella is currently attached to Dynamite Comics, but was originally a property of Warren Publishing. Number 6. Savage Dragon. Savage Dragon is a popular hero as far as the lesser known or indie heroes go, so if you haven't heard of him before, you might want to check him out. Initially, his origins were a mystery. All we knew was that he was a humanoid, green-skinned, dragon-like character who decided to fight as a police officer and hero, fighting against the criminal and mutant super freaks of Chicago. That's also in part because Savage Dragon initially had really bad amnesia in the comics, so he didn't actually even remember his own origin story at the time. Savage Dragon hails from Image Comics and was originally introduced as simply Dragon before being known under the mantle of Savage Dragon. His powers include super strength and super healing. Number 5. Witchblade. Witchblade is a hero who comes from Top Cow Productions. Mainly we've known Witchblade as Sarah Pizzini, but the Witchblade has belonged to many other powerful women throughout the years. The Witchblade is an ancient mystical artifact that typically binds itself to a host who can then wield and use its powers at will. It can be more or less powerful depending on the host, but in this case, since Sarah is one of the most well-known hosts of the Witchblade, we're gonna basically base the ranking on her abilities. The Witchblade can be used to summon mystical armor, which can cover the entirety of its host's body, though typically most are not skilled enough to actually summon that much armor, and instead are usually only covered in little pieces of armor as a result. Hence why you see that Witchblade art and she's like, not really covered in much. This armor grants the wearer invulnerability, but even if its host is harmed, it also grants the power to heal. Aside from creating armor, the Witchblade can also be used to create weapons on the fly. It also increases its host's strength and endurance. Sarah herself was also a trained NYPD detective prior to becoming the host for the Witchblade, so she also brings her skills as an officer and detective to the table. Number 4. Luther Strode. Luther Strode is the main character in the Strange Talent of Luther Strode series, a series that hails from Image Comics. Luther ends up acquiring powers that enhance his strength, durability, speed, and combat skills after receiving a mail order exercise program known as the Hercules method. Luther's powers, however, only create more harm than good in his life and lead to a lot of death, much of it happening as a result of his own involvement. Try as he might to try and do good with it. While not a conventional hero, Luther definitely fits the bill of an anti-hero, or more accurately tragic hero archetype, with everything going awry no matter his intent. He's also someone I would personally love to see take on the hero who made our number 2 spot. Number 3. Radiant Black. Radiant Black is Nathan Burnett, or was Nathan Burnett. Nathan to start, anyways. Going to try not to spoil this series because it's one that I think we should all be reading, so I'm just gonna leave it at Nathan for now. Radiant Black is the first hero we meet in this series. In issue number 1, Nathan ends up getting the powers of the Black Radiant, which basically means he has the powers of a black hole. Radiant Black can manipulate gravity and also becomes super dense with this power set. The downside for this hero is being new means that he's pretty inexperienced in the comics thus far. However, gravity manipulation as a power set is insane, which is how he ranks so high up on this list despite his inexperience. Radiant Black hails from Image Comics, and like I said, if you have not checked out this series and gotten to know the Radiants yet, well, you definitely need to change that, and you need to do so. It's like Power Rangers, but possibly cooler, and I say that having much respect and much love for Power Rangers. So that's not a snub at all, it's just like, it's really good. Number 2. Bulletproof. You know Invincible, but do you know Bulletproof? Fans of the comic series likely do, but if you just became an Invincible fan via the animated series, then this isn't a character that you'd be familiar with just yet. After all, at this point we've only had 1 season so far, so it's very likely Bulletproof will appear in the series, just not until a bit later on. Bulletproof is Xandel Rudolph. He got his powers as a result of his brother using him as basically a science experiment, as his brother Tyrone was actually obsessed with superpowers. Xandel would end up getting powers as a result of this mad science, while his brother would end up dead. Bulletproof also goes on to take up the Invincible mantle at one point, filling in for Mark when he is off-world. Xandel's powers are based on energy absorption, which I think is one of the strongest power sets to have personally. Bulletproof, like other heroes in the Invincible universe, comes to us from Skybound, which is an imprint of Image Comics. Number 1. The Darkness. The Darkness is an ancient elemental force that takes up residence in a host, granting them special powers. One of the most famous hosts that we have come to know as the Darkness is Jackie Estacado. The powers that Jackie wields are similar to what you'd expect from some kind of demonic force. They're also honestly comparable to Venom's power set from Marvel Comics, at least I see a lot of similarities there. The Darkness gives you access to a sort of mystical armor which can be summoned at will. It also grants the user a healing factor, shapeshift abilities, and through them also the ability to fly via wings that you can create. Jackie as the Darkness can also create dark tendrils, which he can also turn into weapons, and he can also summon entities known as Darklings. While more of an anti-hero due to his methods, Jackie Estacado is still a hero in the sense that he generally fights on the side of good. The Darkness hails from Top Cow Productions. And if you do know the Witchblade, you probably know the Darkness, or vice versa. Number 10. Wind. Wind is the name of the main character from this self-titled series, also of course named Wind. It comes from Boom Studios and was written by James Tynion IV with art by Michael Dalianos. Wind is a teenage hero who has always hidden the truth of his elven and magical heritage as a weird blood. His heritage grants him great power he's been hiding from his whole life in an attempt to fit in, being made to believe that magic is dangerous and basically turns people into monsters, or in some other way corrupts them. When he becomes too too old to hide his pointed ears and who he is any longer, he is forced to either try and change or embrace who he really is. And in order to protect his friends against those who would hunt both him and them down, Wind ultimately embraces his magical side, unleashing powerful abilities. Wind has wings, can fly, and can communicate with forest-like spirits or sprites. He also has, like many other teen heroes, the power of friendship, which usually means he ends up making friends with powerful allies. I would say if you love the world of Avatar, you might also end up falling in love with both the character Wind and his series. It reminds me of Avatar, at least, in like the best way. Number 9. Lord Fanny. Lord Fanny is Hilda Morales, who was born as a boy but raised as a girl. She is a transsexual woman and one of the first trans heroes in comics. Lord Fanny was raised as a girl by her grandmother because only women in their culture could become witches, and her grandmother was a powerful witch who wanted to pass on her knowledge and power to Fanny. Although Fanny herself did choose to be a girl, if that makes sense. Lord Fanny is a member of the Invisibles team and was created by writer Grant Morrison and artist Steve Yoel. The Invisibles was a comic series that existed as part of DC's Vertigo imprint back when it was around. I miss Vertigo so much. The series began in 1994, and in issue 13 we'd learn more about Lord Fanny's origins and her very tragic backstory. Lord Fanny's such a cool character. And friends, before we move on to the next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to learn about even more cool, lesser known indie heroes, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Quantum and Woody. You may have heard of Valiant's character Bloodshot, who recently got his own solo film, but what about all of their other superheroes? Quantum and Woody is a series and superhero duo from Valiant Comics. It was inspired by the superhero team-up series Power Man and Iron Fist, but is a lot more bizarre. The series itself was written by Christopher Priest, with art actually by the artist who did Power Man and Iron Fist. Pretty cool. Quantum and Woody are adoptive brothers who, after years of being estranged, are brought back together when their father mysteriously dies. While trying to figure out what really happened to him, they stumble upon superpowers. The catch? They must touch their power bands at least once every 24 hours to not only keep their powers, but also keep from losing their lives as well, as they would then no longer exist if they didn't touch their band. Quantum's powers are more defense-based, while Woody's are more offensive. Oh, and they also kind of have an animal sidekick, Vincent Van Gogh, who is even more bizarre than he already sounds. Just trust me. I don't want to spoil anything, but Vincent Van Gogh. What a goat. Number 7. Josephine. More commonly referred to as Jo, Josephine is the main character and hero of the Fatale series. More commonly referred to as Jo, Josephine is the main character and hero of the Fatale series, which comes to us from Image Comics. Fatale is a supernatural noir-style comic created by the brilliant team-up of writer Ed Brubaker and artist Sean Phillips. Seriously, I love these two together. Some might argue that Jo isn't really a hero, as she's a little bit selfish, but in focusing on uncovering the mysteries of her own power and in trying to save herself, she does inevitably save others. In the long run, at least. There are a lot of people that end up being sacrificed along the way in order for Jo to stand a chance in defeating her enemies in the end. And also there are just straight up people being sacrificed along the way by her enemies who are attempting to track her down. So yeah, she kinda also gets a lot of people killed, but you know, it's not her fault. Jo's powers allow her to control all men who gaze upon her, with them being irresistibly attracted to her no matter who they are and no matter if she wants to influence them or not. Unless of course they are able to protect themselves against her influence with extremely powerful magic, which we only see from a couple characters really in the series. In other words, her power is pretty freaking strong. The only downside here, which is kind of the crux of it all, is that she can't fully control her powers. That is, she can't turn them off when she wants to, which ends up causing a lot of problems for Jo along the way, but I won't spoil any of that. Anyways, if you haven't read Fatale, it's now, I think, it's gonna be 10 years old soon, so go and read it, hurry up! Came out I think in 2012. That's when it started. Number 6. King Mob. King Mob is the leader of the Invisibles. He was once a horror writer who wrote under the pen name Kit Morrison. As the series The Invisibles is created by Grant Morrison, Mob is believed to be sort of a fictional stand-in for Morrison himself. King Mob's legal name was Gideon Starozowski, and he struggles with his alter persona, especially troubled by how violent he, as King Mob, can be. King Mob is not only a leader who wields power in that sense, because he's a leader, but also has experience with firearms and weapons, is a skilled martial artist and fighter, is psychic, can time travel, and employs the use of chaos magic. So, lots of cool things that he can do. Also, if you haven't read The Invisibles, it is really trippy. Go read it. If you like The Matrix, you'll probably like The Invisibles. If you like The Matrix and if you like Doom Patrol, which of course is also Grant Morrison. Not The Matrix, Doom Patrol. Number 5. Laura Wilson / Persephone. Laura Wilson is the main character of the Wicked and the Divine series from Image Comics. The series was created by writer Kieran Gillen and artist Jamie McKelvey. In this story, gods come to life cyclically, being kinda reincarnated. This is known as the recurrence. Laura herself is obsessed with the gods and the pantheon, who are all of course re-emerging at the time. She wants nothing more than to be a god herself. At least that is what she thinks she wants, until her wishes kind of come true. She is revealed to be Persephone, who is believed to be the final god to return during the recurrence. As Persephone, she can summon plants and vines and control them. She also seems to have some kind of control or influence over the underworld. Laura can also create fireballs and reveal to others past events, summoning visions of the past even if she was not present for those events. Number 4. Sludge. Sludge is a hero or anti-hero who comes to us initially from Malibu Comics and was created by writer Steve Gerber and artist Aaron Lopresti. Sludge was once Frank Hogue, a dirty NYPD police officer who accepted bribes in exchange for favors when it came to drug dealings. He was ordered by the crime boss he worked for, John Paul Marcello, to kill another likely dirtier cop. When Frank refused Marcello's request, Marcello had him killed instead. After being shot, a grenade went off, knocking him into a bucket of chemical waste. Who put that chemical waste there? The waste would merge with him after he was dumped into the sewers, turning him into the superheroic monstrosity Sludge. Sludge possesses a healing factor and super strength. He could also kill or mutate his opponents with just a touch. Kinda turns them into sludge. It's pretty dark, really. Number 3. Radiant Yellow. We don't know that much about the newest Radiants, but we do know that they seem interested in protecting innocent people from whatever craziness is currently going on. Okay, hard to keep talking about all of this Radiant Black series without spoiling anything, but once again, I'm gonna try my best. Radiant Yellow appears to be an older gentleman, and as far as I know, we don't really know his name yet. What we do know is that each Radiant seems to have their own power set. At least that's what we're being led to believe by the story and the imagery used. It hasn't exactly all been laid out yet, which is honestly kind of what makes this series so much fun. There's so much we don't know. The mystery of it all. Radiant Yellow, however, seems to have powers based in perhaps light manipulation. To me, that's what it looks like the force blasts that they emit are based in, and it also looks to me like they can perhaps manipulate light to create illusions. That's just based on the imagery that's surrounding them in the comics. Like the other Radiants, Yellow isn't too experienced and doesn't seem to understand the full extent of their powers just yet. Radiant Yellow comes to us from the Radiant Black series, which belongs to Image Comics and is written by Kyle Higgins, who, yes, was also the initial writer of the Power Rangers series, and it was also created by artist Marcelo Costa. Number 2. EXO Mana War. Valiant Comics actually has a whole stable and universe filled with supers, including this one here, EXO Mana War. EXO Mana War is actually the name of the sentient armor that is tied to our hero in this series, Auric of Dacia, a Visigoth from the 5th century AD. Auric would end up being abducted by aliens and enslaved for years before he managed to escape. Auric learned of where his captive's armory was kept and basically ended up getting there and then getting the EXO Mana War suit. He then bonded with the suit and used that advanced tech to escape his captors. However, due to interstellar travel, by the time he arrived back on Earth, it was now the 20th century, basically modern day. Eric would have to adjust to this very different world, and along the way would meet other superheroes from the Valiant universe. That's right, there's not just 2 more, there's a whole bunch of them. EXO Mana War is a character created by writers Jim Shooter, Steve Englehart, and as well as artists Bob Layton and Barry Windsor-Smith. Number 1. Black Hammer. Black Hammer is Joe Weber, the title character of the Black Hammer series, written by Jeff Lemire with artwork by the amazing Dean Ormston. The Black Hammer series was made to be completely different from other more traditional superhero comics, but if I did have to compare Black Hammer to anyone from that more conventional world, I would liken him to Thor myself. Joe Weber inherited the hammer and powers of the former Black Hammer when he died, being transported to the realm of New World as soon as he himself had picked up the fallen hammer. There he learned that he was meant to become the new Black Hammer, replacing the fallen one as Starlock's new and most powerful warrior in the fight against Starlock's evil twin, the Anti anti-god. While being the title character, Black Hammer isn't actually the main character of this series. As we learn near the end of issue number 1, Black Hammer sacrificed himself to save the world from the anti-god and keep his fellow superheroes and friends alive. But what really happened to him, and just how and why are his teammates now seemingly trapped in the timeless and kinda eerie town of Rockwood? Well, to find out, you'll have to read on, true believers. But honestly, you should just go read Black Hammer because it's pretty great.
At number 10 is Amulet, or Fadi Fadlala. He's a great new addition of the Marvel Universe and a very sweet, innocent guy with a pretty good power set too, at least so far. His main power is his Nazar shield, which he can conjure up on command. But one of the things that makes this guy unique is that his powers are fueled by love and care. So for instance, when he shields Mrs. Marvel, he draws power from the concern of her friends to give her complete protection from harm. And these shields can also be manipulated to be used as flying platforms for him to fly around with. Originally from Michigan, Fadi moves to New Jersey to live with his grandmother and cousins who own a juice bar. I like this character and the others on this list because it seems like the writers are really doing their best to tell stories that people relate to in 2022. Having a superhero with an immigrant backstory starting in ancient Baghdad and taking us to a multicultural western city is just a really cool way of acknowledging modern reality for a lot of people. It's gonna be really cool to see where Fadi's story goes in the future, but for now, in his youth, he's already got some good accolades and a pretty nifty power set. At number 9, we have the Spirit of Corruption. Now, this isn't a brand new hero, but it's a new identity that Daniel Ketch has taken on in 2021. In Ghost Rider Volume 9, Issue 4, Daniel and his brother Johnny Blaze have a fight as Daniel is trying to convince his brother that his new position as King of Hell is corrupting his soul. But Blaze tries to kill him in retaliation and Ketch is sent to Hell where he's transformed into the Spirit of Corruption. This is where this entry on the list gets a bit dicey because this newfound power is pretty dark and doesn't scream heroism. But considering Daniel Ketch is a good guy at heart, I think he belongs here. And he holds on to some of his humanity even while transformed into the Spirit of Corruption, which suggests that he could still make sound decisions based on his good nature. Regardless, the powers he's given are extremely powerful, with superhuman strength, durability, and the use of the Blight Blade. This weapon is really cool because whoever gets stabbed with it will turn to sludge by the corruption of their past evil deeds, but if someone hasn't done anything corrupt, they recover from the blow. So he's good, right? Right? Okay, at number 8, we have Prince of Power, or Other One. At first glance, he may seem like a total conceited a-hole, but his backstory is actually really interesting in how he gets to this point. Basically, he is one of 2 sons of Regalia, Queen of Noblor, but when Other One is born, his unattractive appearance and low intelligence, not my words, that's actually how the wiki describes him, leaves him in the shadows of his extremely powerful and successful brother, Magistar. And this leaves him with his name, Other One. So one day as he's sorting paperclips, which he becomes a master at, he manifests the power and attractive appearance of his brother and the Power Stone appears in his jelly bean bowl. He eats it by accident and basically turns into Prince of Power, with a power set that gives him superhuman strength, durability, and speed. But as a cruel trade-off, his intelligence is lowered even further. His powers are kind of bizarre too because whoever he attacks is infused with the power of the Power Stone he's ingested, so basically he just makes his enemies more powerful. Hey, this isn't a list about the most powerful new superheroes, just the newest ones. Alright, at number 7 we've got Shaylee Moon. Like a few others coming up on this list, Shaylee gets her start in Strange Academy, a community of young sorcerers and mages started by the Sorcerer Supreme, Dr. Strange. This is a great thing to see starting in March 2020 because it seems to be introducing a whole new generation of superheroes like Shaylee. Once again, she's still very young and her powers are yet to really flourish, but she is basically a hybrid between a human and a fairy. She can fly using her fairy wings and has the capacity to cast spells. She's also already able to teleport herself and 9 other people at one point, although this power still doesn't come easily to her without some support from her friend Desi. Like some of the other students at the academy, Shaylee's upbringing wasn't so easy, having been barred from visiting her human father and having to grow up without his influence. But only time will tell whether this experience will hinder or further motivate Shaylee to become a powerful hero in the future. At number 6, we've got Emily Bright. Another member of the Strange Academy, Emily might have the best grasp of her powers out of anyone at the school. Since she was a young girl, she's been able to manipulate magic on command. And when she's invited by Doctor Strange to the Academy, she only gets more confident with her powers. She's capable of healing, energy blasts, she's beginning to master the use of the Eye of Agamotto, which allows her to perceive the ties of multiple worlds all at once, and she can multiply living creatures, which could be a good start to a pretty powerful and unique power set. It'll be interesting to see where Emily's abilities go from here, as well as the relationships she'll make at Strange Academy. At number 5 is Zoe Lavo, first appearing in issue 1 of Strange Academy. So far, Zoe has shown abilities of necromancy and hypnosis, but still seems to have lots to learn. Her backstory is particularly tough, and another brilliant bit of writing by the creators of this storyline. With a long bloodline of magicians, Zoe falls victim to depression when she struggles with her own abilities with magic. So to make up for her perceived inadequacies as a sorcerer, she turns to Gaslamp, who sells wishes like drugs. And her powers are increased for a time, but they don't last long and wear off, leading her back to Gaslamp over and over and over again. I'm sure you can see the metaphor here. Basically, she becomes addicted and eventually loses her life to this habit, but is luckily resurrected when her ancestor Marie Lavo is called upon. Now she wears a necklace that keeps her appearing healthy and alive, but when it's removed, a decaying version of herself is revealed as a painful reminder of her past traumas. I think we can all see how these details can be translated to the real issues of modern young people, right? This character's story is just so full of metaphors that it's just brilliant and deserves a spot on this list. At number 4 is Sora, aka the Wolf. Daughter to Psylocke and Forge, Sora first appears in Captain Marvel Volume 10, Issue 22, when the world has become inhabitable, at least on the surface level, due to lethal levels of radiation. Sora lives with a group of other survivors of this nuclear event in an underground facility underneath New York City. And only when Captain Marvel restarts the sun are they able to start re-emerging to the surface of the Earth. Some of Sora's powers include the summoning of psionic weapons and telepathy. She's also known to be a genius, which comes in handy, especially when needing to be resourceful in the position she finds herself in. It's really cool to see new characters like this being introduced in 2022. And not only are we seeing new characters, but new events and storylines that seem to be birthing whole droves of heroes at once. We're really excited to see where Sora's storyline goes, and we hope that this new son works properly. Okay, at number 3 is Bridget, Thors Daughter. Daughter of Thor. Okay, in the same event mentioned in the previous section, Bridget finds refuge underground alongside Sora and a few others. Bridget is unable to lift her father's hammer, so instead she works as a blacksmith for the other survivors. But when Ovi, not sure how to pronounce it, the dark son of Namor, calls Captain Marvel to have talks in New Atlantis, Bridget accompanies her. And thank God for that, because when things naturally go wrong, because it's Namor's son, Bridget is forced to call upon Mjolnir, and succeeds this time, gaining the powers of her father Thor. Seeing as this is a newer character and storyline, there's not much more that has taken place for this character, but this is a pretty damn cool start. And after this major event that basically destroys the surface of the Earth, most of the old heroes and villains alike die. So in the early 2050s, it appears that there's a new wave of heroes ready to get their own issues in the future. Pretty exciting. At number 2, we have Werewolf by Night, or Jake Gomez, an indigenous hero with the ability to transform into a werewolf on command, without the need for moonlight. What makes this character cool and adds some modernity to his abilities is that he can only control his powers when he's listening to a playlist made by his cousin Molly. I think it's a really cool angle to have a young character's powers governed by their emotions and even their favorite music, because it speaks to the reality of a young person's experience in the modern day. I think it also speaks to today's culture in that many young people can sometimes fall victim to their emotions, giving the werewolf power a bit of a metaphorical quality to it. On top of this, the first real victim that Jake faces is the Life Pharmaceutical Organization, who have captured some of the tribal people from Hopi Reservation in the Painted Desert. So it's a pretty good commentary on modern issues if you ask me. First appearing in 2022's Werewolf by Night Volume 3, Issue Number 1, Jake is just starting his journey as a new Marvel hero, and we're very excited to see where this character goes next. At number 1, we have Dr. Multiverse, or Maya Chimera from Earth 8, who made her debut as recently as January 2022, so only 3 months ago as of posting this video. She first appears in Justice League Incarnate number 1, and I'm putting her at number 1 because I feel like this hero has the biggest potential out of all of them on the list. Her powers and backstory are really cool, and her direct association to everything multiverse just screams mainstream hit to me. I mean, her powers are crazy. She can basically track down and transport herself to the immediate position of anyone she's ever interacted with, wherever they are in the multiverse. She can also withstand explosions at point blank range without being hurt, and can see variants and alternate versions of people from different realities, and recognize any person's identity and home universe just by glancing at them. She's basically a god with powers like that, and it's cool to be here for her big debut in 2022.
Cavalier actually started out as a vigilante with a prowess in fencing. He was even shown to be better than Batman at fencing. In fact, Batman decided to let him remain operating as a vigilante after clashing with him, but Cavalier was pulled into a life of crime after falling in love with the woman who was responsible for taking a life. In the end, he was forced to surrender and choose to give up his life for the woman that he loved. Honestly, while kind of a weird villain, I feel like Cavalier doesn't get enough love. His character and story could have evolved into something really cool, it could have continued, but instead, the only other time that we see him, primarily, other than of course Legends of the Dark Knight and Blackest Night, where he comes back to life because Blackest Night, is in a Suicide Squad series during the Prime continuity, where he's basically used as cannon fodder for the purpose of their story. Because Suicide Squad. What villains do you feel don't get enough love in the comics? Let me know down in the comments. Just because you are considered a low-level thug, or in Fleet Delmar's case a supposed freedom fighter, doesn't mean you can't rise above your rank and become something much greater. That is just what Fleet did. He ended up getting his hands on some alien tech that allowed him to move up to the next level when it came to his rank as a threatening and powerful Batman villain. He was supposedly apprehended by Batman years before, who had tormented him with fear gas as punishment for his crimes. This experience apparently led to him losing his eyes and becoming blind, which is why he decided to seize the alien tech and use it to get revenge. The helmet he wore granted him psychic powers, allowing him to read the minds of his opponent and counteract their attacks easily in a fight. The helmet also allowed him to absorb energy blasts, which at one point allowed Karma to take on both Black Lightning and Batman at the same time. Hush has managed to pull off some of the most horrific schemes over the years and gotten under Batman's skin many times, and Catwoman's skin even, quite literally, when he stole her actual beating heart. Thomas Elliot is not only a powerful villain because of his intense vendetta against the Wayne family and Batman, but because he also is often shown to have the skill and the strength to match Batman, as well as the cunning. He has taken Batman on in hand-to-hand combat and fared surprisingly well, and he's managed to set into motion outlandish plots like impersonating Bruce Wayne by giving himself plastic surgery to make himself look nearly identical, then capturing and threatening the real Bruce Wayne's life and threatening to disfigure him so that he could just permanently take his place. And yet still, Hush is one of Batman's lesser known villains, simply because he's really only had a few prominent moments in the comics. While Punchline might be new on the scene, she did go toe-to-toe with Harley Quinn, herself known for being a pretty deadly and unstoppable villain when she wants to be. Hello, Harley Quinn did take on the Holy Trinity all together at one point, and Punchline, when she faced Harley Quinn, she came out on top. Surprisingly. Punchline sliced Harley Quinn's throat and left her for dead in the sewers below Gotham during Joker War. But of course, Harley would recover because she is still Harley frickin' Quinn. Still, Punchline's victory was surprising for her being such a new and unseasoned character and baddie. So I think we learned then that she is a force to be reckoned with and is definitely a character to keep our eyes on. Punchline seems to enjoy fighting with stiletto daggers and dreaming up her own deadly brews of poison, even creating her own special brew of Joker venom during Joker War for Batman, which gave him his own pretty bad trip. Pretty much everything about Owlman from Earth 3's crime syndicate is surprising and intriguing. He is the evil counterpart to Batman, but is not Earth 3's version of Bruce, technically. Instead, he is Thomas Wayne Jr., who on his Earth was Bruce's elder brother. He himself plotted to kill his parents as as he believed they were mismanaging the family's wealth, which of course would end up being his inheritance. In the end, Bruce refused to help Thomas and even attempted to convince him to not go through with his plot. So Thomas Jr., saddened, was ultimately forced to take his brother's life, having had much higher hopes for Bruce. Thomas would then become Owlman and use a combination of fear, wealth, and influence to take control of Gotham. Still missing his brother at this point, he decided to find someone else to fill that hole in his heart. After meeting Dick Grayson at the circus, Thomas orchestrated the death of Grayson's parents in secret and then offered him support and a home, manipulating him into becoming his sidekick, Talon. Honestly, I love Dr. Phosphorus and I think he does not get enough love. One, he's got such a cool and unique design, and two, I also kind of feel for him in regards to like his origin story. Dr. Phosphorus was once a nuclear scientist, Dr. Alexander Sartorius, who just wanted to bring nuclear power to the people of Gotham. And yeah, I know back in the day we were all concerned about nuclear power, but it is one of the cleanest forms of energy, okay? So I don't think really he was doing anything too sinister here. However, he was resisted at almost every turn as the people of Gotham protested his efforts. Eventually though, he was able to build his plant, but he was simply forced to build further away from the city on the sea. The plant tragically did have a meltdown, which resulted in him being transformed into the monstrous looking Dr. Phosphorus. Sartorius, I believe, saw Gotham as the enemy since they had so vehemently opposed him, forcing him to relocate his plant. And so he decided to get revenge on the city, but of course he was stopped by Batman, and would be thereafter. Kite Man is often relegated to the C-list villains in the DC universe. He's often considered one of Batman's lamest villains, and yet via the Harley Quinn animated series, he saw kind of a revitalization of his character, with him even getting a solid fan base due to how he was depicted in the show. Kite Man, while an all-around good guy in the animated series, is still considered to be a villain in the animated universe and the comics, albeit still of course a C-list one. And yet in the animated show, I feel like what makes us love him so much is the fact that he's working hard to try and make a name for himself, and that's kind of a huge part why I think people love him in the show. That and the fact that he seems fairly comfortable with just who he is, even though he isn't necessarily, you know, a top tier villain and he knows it. It doesn't mean that he doesn't try, and it doesn't mean that he is ashamed of who he is or even his gimmick. Hell yeah, Kite Man. Brother Eye in Future's End is an entity that takes over the world. Brother Eye was initially created to be a hero protecting the world from any threat. In Future's End, the artificial intelligence was created by Batman and Mr. Terrific, but its prime directive ended up kind of corrupting it. In DC's main continuity, Batman created the AI to keep an eye on the Justice League, who he had basically lost trust in at that point. Brother Eye came to realize that humanity's greatest threat was actually, well, humanity itself, and sought for complete control of the people of planet Earth, seeing this as the only way to protect humans from themselves. It's that age-old AI warning story. Be careful what you wish for. Creating AI technology may one day result in that tech rising up and realizing just how awful humans can really be, and either hold you prisoner for the rest of your life or ultimately just kill you, because maybe the world would be better off that way. You know that age-old story. Peacekeeper 01 is a character who has made a few appearances in the comics, still being relatively new. He was introduced during Tinian IV's run and was one of the people recruited by the magistrate in Gotham to keep peace in the city. He was in fact one of many peacekeepers recruited, but most importantly, he was of course the first. 01. Peacekeeper 1 was also unique in the sense that he was recruited specifically to take Batman's place as Gotham's protector. Sean Mahoney was originally an aspiring police officer, coming from a long line of those who worked in the service. However, due to a troubled youth and some serious anger problems, I'd say, he was refused by the GCPD when he applied, instead ending up working at Arkham. Following the events of A-Day, he would be recruited by Simon Saint, who of course was working for the magistrate, to act as the first candidate for the Peacekeeper program. Sean, as Peacekeeper 01, possesses cybernetic enhancements which make him strong, tough, and a formidable opponent whose tech allows him to learn and improve every time he fights someone. This was one whose reappearance even caught me by surprise during the Three Jokers story. While I am not sure if we know where that story falls in continuity yet, in continuity, outside of continuity, it was a still long-awaited read that I quite enjoyed, and which brought back a villainous sidekick of old that I did not know how much I really missed until I saw him return. Gaggy is Gagsworth A. Gagsworthy, and he is an old school sidekick of the Jokers from way back in the day before he was ever with Harley Quinn. In fact, at one point, Gaggy also returned to get revenge on Harley for taking his place at the Joker's side, but that happened, I believe, during Gotham City Sirens. In Three Jokers, however, Gaggy returns as one of the Three Jokers' sidekicks. However, his comeback is quite short-lived, as he ends up being devoured by a Joker shark Rest in peace, Gaggy. What a tragic way to go.
The West Coast Avengers get all the weird villains. Cactus is a great example. He is a cactus and he's funny. Literally the first time he's seen in West Coast Avengers 17, Wonder Man laughs at him because he's a cactus. Cactus was created by the Dominius computer from a desert cactus. The computer gave the cactus human-like mobility and intelligence. This cactus is the original, but there are hundreds of duplicates out there apparently. Cactus's powers are shooting his cactus needles at a destructive speed and regenerating quickly, as he is technically a super powered plant. There were two other villains created from desert elements alongside Cactus. They were Butt, made of rock, and Gilla, made from the venomous lizard called the Gilla Monster. A super cactus, while funny and cool, didn't stand much of a chance against the West Coast Avengers and was defeated, but maybe we'll see a clone of him somewhere soon. Live action Two Gun Kid or Rawhide Kid can fight it. The leader of the group of desert misfits Cactus was Sunstroke. He was a human, however we don't really know how he got his powers. The villain just says he created himself, whatever that means. All he says to explain is that a man's sense of strategy was melded with the power of the Day Star. Merging with this power made him capable of absorbing light and heat. He can also generate light and heat to attack with. He did threaten to melt the armor off Iron Man's back. He fought the Avengers in the desert that day and disappeared shortly after that battle was ultimately lost. He resurfaced to attend a weapons expo and briefly fought Captain America. He went on to fight the X-Men. Later he joined the Masters of Evil, but was arrested after the team unsuccessfully took on the Thunderbolts. Echidna is literally mother. She is the mother of monsters both in Greek mythology and Marvel mythology. She has fought the Avengers Standard a few times and was affiliated with the Defenders of the Deep. She helped King Namor keep humans out of the water when the king declared the oceans off limits to everything that wasn't native to it. Echidna was also part of the Doom Maidens. During her time there, she attempted to recruit the Amazons, but ended up fighting the Amazons and losing. Most of her scraps with the Avengers happened while she was on the Defenders of the Deep. Eventually, she fought Ghost Rider and was neutralized by him. Icon among men, literally his name is Icon. Icon appeared in 2 issues, Excalibur 59 and 60. He was a Wakandan biochemist who experimented on himself with the advanced tech Wakanda had to offer. The experiments resulted in him gaining the ability to turn himself and others into wood. With his new power, he set his eyes on the Wakandan throne. He had the idea in his head that Black Panther did not respect him as a scientist. Not true, by the way. One night during a Wakandan celebration, Icon shows up and starts turning people to wood. Luckily, the Avengers are in attendance, something Icon did not plan for. He does have an ace up his sleeve though. When someone is turned to wood, they are then under Icon's control. Black Panther wouldn't let the Avengers attack the wooden army as they are still technically his subjects. But worry not, out of literally nowhere comes this guy called Jungle Man to distract Icon. Jungle Man gives the Avengers their moment to start the fight, but Icon surrenders very quickly. The reason is because his whole plan rested on taking the throne quickly through fear, because the turning to wood thing only lasts an hour. The change back makes him pass out and he's carried away by Black Panther. Grotesque is hard to kill, for real. He first fought against the X-Men and was the guy that everyone thought eliminated Professor X, but he didn't because it was Changeling, but the energy blast Grotesque took then didn't kill him, and he went on to become a menace to Miss Marvel next. She also hit him with something that should have ended him. He again survived and fought the Avengers. In this particular battle, he was part of a group of subterranean beings that were initially fleeing their home underground because it was being attacked by deviants. Grotesque was a villain at heart though, and later, after that battle, kidnapped Thor's human host, Donald Blake, holding him hostage while Grotesque's lava men brought the living rock to the surface. The idea was that the living rock would then blow up a lot of the surface world. Thor made sure that didn't happen and broke the rock before it could come up. All the energy from the rock supposedly destroyed Grotesque. But he lived. He really is that one Emma Roberts surprise but you thought you'd seen the last of me meme. Turns out the energy just destroyed his body, not his spirit, so that was still floating around. The lava men took that spirit and put it in impenetrable armor, and he went on to fight the X-Men again. Nightcrawler found the cheat code to defeat Spirit Armor Grotesque. He took off his helmet. That's it. That caused the spirit to dissipate. Is this the end for Grotesque? Who knows? He has come back so many times, I wouldn't be surprised if we see him again soon. Making a deal with the devil is a common occurrence in the Marvel Universe. Actor Jason Roland joined joined the trend in Tower of Shadows 5 when he made a deal with a demon, acting success in exchange for his soul. The demon was revealed to be Satanish, created by Dormammu and one of the most powerful demons seen by Earth. Jason's side effect of the deal was he looked like a monster, so he stayed out of the spotlight for a few years. He also, in that time, took on the villain name Hangman. Eventually, he met the mercenary group Night Shift and took over the team for Satanish. Hangman convinced the team to give up their souls to him so he could have more fame and power. The only thing was, in the middle of all of this, his group caught the attention of the West Coast Avengers. The West Coast Avengers and Night Shift, while initially at odds, joined forces once the Night Shift realized their souls were in jeopardy. When the two teams defeated Hangman and his master, Hangman left to join another team of villains, the Lethal Legion. The Legion belonged to Satanish, and they again fought the West Coast Avengers and lost. The name Hangman didn't come out of nowhere. He carries around an enchanted rope. The rope can be as long as he wants it to be, and you can't cut it unless he wants you to. Literally, by force of will, Hangman can make the rope uncuttable. The rope is like an extension of Hangman as it responds telepathically to him. But if you hurt the rope, you won't hurt him. Necrodamus was born all shriveled up. His body was incredibly weak. The natural fix here is to turn to dark magic. That's the only thing you can do. Necro discovered that he can gain strength and even a godlike form if he steals the lives of innocent people. Classic move. The first time he tried it, he was defeated by the Defenders. The second time he tried it, he was stopped by the Avengers, specifically Scarlet Witch. She sent his soul straight to Limbo. Eventually, he did make it out of Limbo and fought the Fantastic Four, and then was sent back to Limbo. Eventually, the shriveled man was taken care of by Agatha Harkness when she created zombies to attack him. He did have quite the run though. Agatha, Fantastic Four, Defenders, and of course the Avengers. Even though Necro's physical body was weak, he still had some magical powers like flight, teleportation, energy bolts, and shields. There are actually 3 Marvel characters that have taken on the name Chlorine, and none of them are popular. Marvel keeps trying and it has yet to work. I think they are all villains too. For sure the Chlorine I'm talking about right now is a villain. The actual name of this maybe person was never revealed, but his body is made of chlorine, so he is Chlorine. I don't think this villain is human. He refers to humans as humans, and usually if you are a human, you wouldn't make a point to do that. This particular version of the character has only been seen once, in Avengers Volume 1, Issue 188. In that single issue, we meet the whole team of elements actually. There's 4 of them: chlorine, carbon, phosphorus, vanadium, and radium. They are referred to as the Elementals, but they are not affiliated with the ones in Spider-Man Far From Home at all. The Elementals catch the attention of the Avengers because they are messing with a nuclear reactor. They might have been humans that forgot they were humans. It's complicated. What we do know is that they take humans to this pod connected to the nuclear reactor to rearrange their atoms to make them the desired element. So maybe that's where they all came from. They are trying to create 100 more element people. That is their goal. My guess is they want the whole periodic table. They fail, and the Avengers eventually defeat them. Chlorine did make the team retreat at first though. Since his entire body is chlorine, he can release large quantities of chlorine gas, and that's very poisonous. He doesn't seem to have any other powers past that though. The Avengers defeat the Elementals by blowing up the reactor. The mixture of nuclear plasma and their charged atoms breaks down their atomic structures, which is their bodies. So it's presumed that they all, including Chlorine, are done for. But according to the conservation of mass, nothing can be created or destroyed though. It's possible that if the character were to pick up steam, someone could just do some weird experiment and put all the atoms back together and we'd have Chlorine again. This guy was primarily a villain to Thor, but did scrap with the Avengers too. Jared Carstairs was a skilled inventor and weatherman. Jared was not a good person. He stalked a girl to the point of getting fired from being the local weatherman. He couldn't handle not having the weather in his life, so he became Weather Maker. He created a suit that could create weather, not just sunny days, but also rain and tornadoes and lightning and hail. He, a force to be reckoned with. He ended up kidnapping the person he stalked, and that's when the Avengers stepped in. Weather Maker did a decent job of holding off the Avengers until Thor came back and destroyed the suit's power pack. Without it, the Weather Maker was just a guy. He was arrested, but the clever guy hid some weather circuitry in a hollow tooth and used that to escape jail. His escape effort channeled the Godstorm, which had been imprisoned by Thor, and the Godstorm hoped that this weather-crazed man would be his vessel of vengeance against Thor. So the Weather Maker got actual powers from this Godstorm and became Torrent. He ransacked New York City until Thor returned to take him back back to Asgard. The guy used so much power, he pretty much exhausted himself. This made it easy for Thor to bring Torrent to Odin and get depowered and sent back to Earth. All of this happened in the Thor Godstorm series from 2001. You know how some people believe that every celebrity is secretly a member of some like demonic group or something? Well, Marvel actually did explore that once. This villain's name is Defiler, and he fought the West Coast Avengers. The Defiler is a demon. His particular brand of demon does not reside in our dimension, but does need the life force of others to survive and maintain his powers and his dimension. So he decided to come and kidnap people on Earth. But he did it with style. He arrived to Earth as a rock star. His band was called Corruption of Innocence. Iconic all around, no notes here. It's such a clever idea because people love celebrities, they will follow them anywhere, so it really wasn't hard for the guy to get people to literally follow him anywhere. And when he finished them off, there were hundreds of other people willing to take their place. The Defiler took everything up a notch at one of their concerts and started kidnapping the entire crowd. That's not even the wildest part of this issue, the whole thing is bonkers. To save all the people that had been transported through the portal to the demon dimension, Hank Pym and Mockingbird go to the dimension with a big rope tied around Pym. There are at least 100 people to save though, and all their life forces have been depleted, so they're all too weak to walk out. The solution? Hank Pym takes a fingerboard, those little tiny skateboards, and turns it into a huge skateboard so everyone can ride it out. The Defiler ultimately does get defeated when he is thrown back into his world. It's presumed that he is gone forever and died alongside his world. The world has nothing on it to feed anymore, so it is presumably gone. If you want to check out all the wacky antics, the comic is West Coast Avengers Volume 2, Issue 38. Orphan is an orphan. Orphan is also a baby that lives suspended in an advanced robotic suit and thinks like an adult. Orphan's parents were studying the Source Wall. The Source Wall is the barrier that surrounds the multiverse. One day that barrier was breached, obliterating Orphan's parents. Orphan's mom was pregnant with him at the time, and he survived because of his family's techno-familiar, Darling. Darling assimilated Orphan's mom's body and created an artificial womb. Since Orphan and Darling were so close to the wall being breached, Orphan absorbed the power from what was on the other side of the wall, energy from the Source. The Source is the source of everything. Its power is limitless, and Orphan has that running through his veins. It gives him powers like teleportation and energy blasts. Darling and Orphan are tied to each other in some ways. When Darling was destroyed, Orphan went into a sort of like catatonic state. Dead Ringer can take on the form of any dead body he touches and can cause way more problems than you might think. Louis Dexter is a mutant. His mimicking abilities are not reserved for people, he can also mimic animals. He discovered his abilities by touching his deceased cat and father, and that is so traumatic. Dexter chose to use his powers for evil. He started to remove pieces of heroes from their graves, because when he touches a deceased super person, he gets their powers. Dexter is limited to one person at a time, and if he wants to revisit the body of someone, he has to touch them again, and that is hard when you take decaying into account. Seems like it could be a major inconvenience, so he decided to make his life easier. He was going to start carrying pieces of heroes in a cigar box with him. The pieces, gross. Dead Ringer's most famous battle was when he and his partner Super Patriot became Porcupine and Captain America to destroy Captain America's reputation. The two staged a fight at a charity gala and deliberately hurt the crowd. The pair were eventually arrested. Death Adder is one of the many villains Death Ringer has impersonated, so spoiler, he was deceased at one point but was revived and then died again. Death Adder was Roland Burroughs. Roland received a surgery courtesy of Roxxon Oil Company. The surgery was supposed to give him claws, a bionic tail, and gills. The part of the surgery to give him the gills went wrong, and Roland lost the ability to speak, becoming mute. Roland, now a villain, received his costume and joined the Serpent Squad. Death Adder and the Serpents became mercs for hire. He was a pretty serious foe, as his tail could move up to 60 miles per hour and was adorned with a bunch of sharp poisonous prongs. So if the sheer force of getting smacked doesn't take you out, the poison sure will. His claws also had the poison in them, and Death Adder has had about 30 appearances total. Powerful sorcerer Duran once tried unleashing monsters in Mexico City, causing immense amounts of damage. Duran lives in Mexico, and he hated seeing the nature there getting destroyed. He was angry with developers and the large amounts of pollution caused by the tourism industry and just the way people treat his home. He became radicalized, and that is not something you want from a powerful sorcerer. Duran kidnapped a girl and used her as a vessel for the true power of the earth, as Duran puts it, so she caused a massive explosion downtown, and it got some local Mexican heroes involved and Superman. This all happened in Superman Annual Volume 2 Issue 12. It's also the only appearance Duran has had. The big final battle happens in downtown Mexico City, and it's a disaster. There is a huge firestorm unleashed, and it takes the powers of Superman and the 3 local heroes to get everything under control. It wasn't easy. Duran learned sorcery from Firewolf, and Firewolf was able to control Superman's mind, so now Duran is capable of that and also crushing the windpipes of Superman with only his mind, among other things, like being able to call upon the primal powers of Mother Earth. The American dragon Unkahilla was based on a real legend in Sioux mythology, and she's also a complete menace. She is a demon residing in the ground, and it destroys everything around her, especially the surface and anyone on it. She has bad vibes to the point where she can pollute the soil she just passes through, making it unusable. Unkahilla is somewhere between 30 to 50 feet long. She terrorizes the local indigenous communities, kidnapping people, swallowing people whole, destroying the food supply. Literally not the kind of pest you want in your garden. She can also create monster children that are like mini hers. She needed to be exterminated, and Wolverine was around and ready to help, so he went to take her down. Only she was a tough fight. It wasn't until her heart was separated from her body that she finally went down. Styx and Stone have very different origin stories, but they cause trouble together like they are brothers. Styx was originally homeless, and Stone was on a team of scientists doing experimental cancer research. The team of scientists were offering compensation for anyone willing to be experimented on, so Styx signed up. Stone had an interesting theory that he was unauthorized to test. Stone thought that someone could become immune to cancer the same way someone can become immune to snake bites. Of course, he did run the test on Styx, and of course it ended in the worst way. Styx became a walking cancer, decaying any organic material he comes in contact with. Awful outcome, but at least Stone's theory was right. Styx was immune to cancer himself. Stone felt really bad about this and vowed to find a cure for Styx. Somewhere along the way, we actually don't know how it happened, but Stone turned into a big stone monster, and with that he gained the ability to decay any inorganic matter. So Styx and Stone together are a team you do not want to go up against, no matter who or what you are. Blood Shadow is a very cool villain that I would never want to meet, but I think they should bring back anyway. He was known for facing off against Wolverine and perishing at the claws of Wolverine. Blood Shadow was capable of telepathy. He was also intimately familiar with the human body and its deadly pressure points like the back of his hand. Blood Shadow was also a trained martial artist. He combined this trio of skills into an interesting fighting style. He would use telepathy to determine an opponent's next move, his martial arts training to counter it, and his knowledge of the human body to determine which deadly pressure points would be exposed and which ones he could hit in the moment. Unfortunately for Blood Shadow, his telepathy was a bit too powerful in a fight with Wolverine, and he accidentally unlocked Wolverine's base feral animalistic instincts. No one can survive those, not even Blood Shadow. Headhunter started out as nothing more than a con woman, but using her powers of persuasion, she became the most powerful woman on Wall Street. She is deranged, and I mean that with everything in me. Headhunter is obsessed with Namor, so obsessed she kidnaps him and puts him in her wall of heads. You know what hunters do with animal heads they take as trophies? She did that with the people that crossed her on her journey to the top of Wall Street. She also has the ability to mesmerize people and control them, so that also has helped her in her journey to the top of the financial world. The wall was eventually destroyed, and it turns out all the people were actually just catatonic, put to sleep by Headhunter's mesmerizing powers. Headhunter also has little knife fingers, and she wears a lot of suits. The powerful villainess known as Verna once tried to destroy all spider people. Y'all, I've been waiting for the chance to talk about Verna. Verna is from Earth 001. She comes from a family that has dedicated their lives to traveling across the multiverse, hunting down and exterminating all spider totems. The family goes by the Inheritors. Like a leech, they parasite powers from other people, feeding on their life forces. The Inheritors eventually locked in on the spider totems because they wanted to defeat the spider deity of Earth 001, so that means it has to be every other world's battle too. They went up against an army of spider people. The odds were never in their favor. Verna and her family were left on a super radioactive Earth, Earth 3145, and were trapped there forever as they are sensitive to radiation and have to stay put in a tower. Verna ultimately passed after escaping said tower while trying to get her father's soul that was trapped in a crystal. Verna's main power is the life force energy absorption thing. Once Verna touches a person, even if she doesn't drain your life force all the way and you live, she can still sense you from almost anywhere, which is super creepy. Verna is also technically immortal. She doesn't age, she doesn't get sick, sick, but she can be exterminated. If someone were to split her in two, she's done for. So overall, a pretty sick woman in all senses of the word, but the reason I have been waiting to mention her, one of my favorite movies when I was a little girl was Barbie Fairytopia. The main villain in that movie was La Verna, and she looks exactly the same as Marvel's Verna. Look at the hair and look at the names, they are the same. I am not saying they copied Barbie, but there are clues. Deathstalker was once a wealthy man from a prestigious family, then he decided to become a criminal. He invented something called the T-Ray or Time Displacer Ray. When used, it transports its victims to an interdimensional void for a few hours. When used, the ray looked really scary because it would make people dissolve before your eyes. It wasn't until hours later that you would find out the person was actually fine. In a fight with Daredevil, his gun exploded and it sent him to the limbo-like realm permanently. He eventually figured out how to get back to Earth, but the catch was he could only be here for up to like 5 hours before he was pulled back to limbo. During the 5 hours, he appeared like he was a phantom, and he really used that to his advantage, stealing tech and creating cybernetic death grip devices to put in his gloves. Including his Dead Ringer appearance, Deathstalker has appeared about 24 times.
White Rabbit is Lorena Dodson, and while she might kinda seem like a joke villain, we've seen some pretty dark storylines featuring her in the past few years. White Rabbit is often out to prove that she's one of the baddest bads around and earn acclaim and recognition for her misdeeds. In the Absolute Carnage one-shot, Symbiote Spider-Man, we get to see White Rabbit featured in a much darker tale, when she runs into a judge who at one point came into contact with the Venom symbiote. In the flashback, we find out she ends up getting on his bad side, and in order to get back at him for what she believes was an unfair trial, she comes after him and his son, confronting them with a gun. It turns out the weapon is a joke gun, which actually shoots out just a little flag that says bang, but the shock of the whole event actually triggers a heart attack in the judge's son, Dan, who dies as a result. White Rabbit is arrested, but escapes out of her trial, being busted out by a large mech-like rabbit, very White Rabbit style. She torments the judge as she leaves, who attempts to break into the courtroom to kill her, but accidentally shoots an innocent court stenographer instead. Lorena might have shown remorse here, but instead she actually felt absolved of guilt by the judge's act, showing just how twisted and cold she can be, something that we don't always see a side of her, and I honestly feel like she can be pretty scary at times because of that. These are the kinds of stories I would love to see more of with White Rabbit. What do you think of White Rabbit? Would you like to see more just like intense stories with villains? I feel like we just sometimes don't get enough of those. I mean, sometimes we get too many. Once again, Joker, I'm looking at you. Amazo is no ordinary android. He possesses technology that allows him to replicate the abilities and powers of the superheroes that he battles. This gives him a significant advantage in combat, making him an opponent to be reckoned with, and that's not all. Amazo can even duplicate his opponent's weapons, making him an even more challenging adversary. This is a villain who can take on not just the powers of the Justice League, but who can also grapple, lasso, and fly majestically with a cape, I imagine, if he so chooses, with the best of them. The Flash, Aquaman, Martian Manhunter, Wonder Woman, and Green Lantern make up the roster that Amazo initially faced, and as such, these are usually the power sets that he possesses by default. But in general, Amazo is pretty amazing. Yeah, they don't do a lot with him, I feel like. This next one is honestly just so ridiculous. We're talking about Swarm, a ridiculous villain, but that doesn't mean that I of course don't want more of him in the comics. After all, he is ridiculous, and if you know me, if you've watched any videos that I have hosted, you know that I love ridiculous. Who is Swarm? He's a German World War II scientist who is made up of bees. Killer bees. He escaped after the war and had enough loot in his possession to basically fund his research on killer bees. What he likes to do, mad science stuff. That research led him to becoming devoured by a swarm of initially passive bees who returned monstrous and then became basically uncontrollable, trying to control them, and it backfired. However, his consciousness ended up merging with the bees as he was devoured, allowing him to basically live on in the swarm, which he often manipulates into a humanoid shape. Also, I gotta say, I was so excited when I was playing Marvel Strike Force when I got Swarm in my game. We're not sponsored, but I wish we were. Marvel Strike Force, hit us up, come on. This next villain is very obscure. We're talking about Baron Bug. Yeah, we got another bug villain for you if you like bug villains. I know I do. Baron Bug and his insect army. He first appeared in House of Mystery issue number 163 back in the 1960s. Here he was introduced as the wildest villain yet on the cover, and ended up going up against hero Robbie Reed, the original owner of the H-Dial for those that didn't know. Despite the claimed that he was the wildest villain. This wasn't enough to keep Baron Bug going in terms of his momentum, and he quickly fell into obscurity. He did resurface many years later in the 2000s in the 52 series and Doom Patrol, but still most people don't even know who he is, never mind the fact that he was once labeled as the wildest villain in all of DC Comics. A bold claim indeed. One of my favorite new villains from Spider-Man, this one actually comes to us from a not as well known Spider-Man title, or at least I don't think as many people know about it, Spine-Tingling Spider-Man. Now we're not talking about the physical comic series, which also is really great, but instead the digital-only Infinity comic. If you aren't familiar with the Infinity comics, they are nice, light, short reads that are laid out more like kind of like a webtoon, where you like scroll down vertically through them to the end. I personally love this format, it's so cool, and there's just so much alternate and interesting stuff that creatives can do with storytelling in this format. The Infinity comics are also only available through Marvel Unlimited, so if you want to check them out, get Marvel Unlimited and you can check them all out. Honestly, Marvel Unlimited is also great. Once again, not sponsored, but I wish we were, we should be, Marvel. In the Infinity comic by Saladin Ahmed, the villain in this story haunts Spider-Man with nightmares, keeping him awake and exhausted. Honestly, my biggest fear, I constantly feel like I'm overworking myself and I do not get enough sleep due to having some mild insomnia, I'd say, and I have a fear of dying from exhaustion as a result. Although, I hope I'm a long way away from that and I'm not that exhausted. In the end, we learn that this villain is known simply as the Sleep Stealer. Honestly, like I said, so scary. And they also have a haunting song, which you can find on Marvel's website that accompanies them as well, being played throughout the comic. I think it's also on YouTube too. Yeah, you should listen to it. It's creepy. Woo. From super creepy to super goofy, Calendar Man to most people is just a guy who is obsessed with the date. What a ridiculous villain. But in reality, he's also one of the most accomplished villains. During his first appearance, he almost managed to defeat Batman, one of the greatest and smartest detectives in the entire world, by giving him an almost unsolvable problem. That's right, he almost stumped Batman. Calendar Man sent an anonymous letter promising to commit 5 crimes, one each day, each one corresponding to a particular season in theme, with the 5th day also being a clue as to the true identity of Calendar Man with the 5th season. What is the 5th season? Batman failed to capture Calendar Man on the first 4 days, often arriving late to the scene of the crime. On the 5th day, it was only an ad for Calendar Man's side hustle as a magician, as he was playing for a suspicious amount of time coinciding with the crimes, 5 days at the Bijou Theater in Gotham, that allowed Batman to connect the dots. Where would Batman be without ads from the local newspaper? Where would any of us be without the local newspaper? Even Batman knows that local news is important. Also, I didn't say what the 5th season was, but you can guess what it is in the comments, and we'll also see how many of you are probably familiar with that story, because I know I couldn't figure it out. When I got to that reveal, I was like, really? Oh, okay. Mr. Smile and Mr. Sulk both have too cool a design to not do more things in the comics. They make their first appearance back in Doctor Strange issue number 5 back in 2020, and only recently made another new appearance in Vengeance of the Moon Knight earlier this year in 2024, reminding me of how much I love them and think they deserve just more appearances. Hopefully, we won't have to wait another few years before we get another appearance of these two. You might think you know Polka Dot Man, but do you really know him? If you've seen James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, you are familiar with a version of Abner Krill, but the original Polka Dot Man, also Abner Krill, of the New Earth continuity, was a bit different when it came to his power set. Initially, when Polka Dot Man or Mr. Polka Dot first appeared, he came armed with multiple different weapons, which actually all came from the polka dots on his suit. He could basically pull them off his suit and then turn them into any means of different weapons and devices. Super cool. Even once turning one into a getaway vehicle. Yeah, an entire vehicle from one polka dot. This is the version of Polka Dot Man I'd be interested in seeing getting more love, especially if we got like a live action version of this version of Polka Dot Man, although I did enjoy the version that they included in the Suicide Squad, so you know, that was good too, but the polka dots were a little different. What's better than leaping somewhat high? Walking on stilts. That's the premise behind this strange Marvel supervillain. Wilbur Day is a scientist who began his life of crime after stealing a coworker's design and using it to build a pair of armored stilt legs. Granted, his entire body is covered in metallic armor as well, and it is pretty strong. He even smashed She-Hulk down through the street and into a subway tunnel one time during a fight. Pretty impressive. But tragically, being taller than other heroes does not mean you're automatically better than them in a fight. There's of course that whole knock the legs out from under them strategy, and of course his armor also apparently has weak spots which have been exposed in the comics before to just easily take him down. They're like, oh, a weak point, poke. He's done. Iron Man at one point even fought armor with armor by throwing one of Stiltman's legs right back in his face after he detached them to jettison away and knock Stiltman out as a result. Poor Stiltman, he just can't catch a break. And finally, our last but certainly not our least villain, definitely our most villain, Silver Swan, has such a cool design that when I first saw her in modern day comics, I thought she was actually a new character. But it turns out no. She is a classic Wonder Woman villain. The fact that I didn't know this made me think that she just hasn't gotten enough love throughout her history. So I'm here to help remedy that fact by including her on this list and telling you about her in case you didn't know either. There have been a few different versions of Silver Swan over the years, but she is at her core originally an 80s character, making her first appearance in Wonder Woman issue number 288 back in 1981. In the modern day, she is Vanessa Capitelis, and her powers allow her to manipulate tiny nanite robots in her bloodstream. Move over, Bloodshot! Initially, the character was known for her flight abilities and sonic scream, and for those that love the classic version, do not worry, she still has both those powers in the modern day as well.
Number 10. Alpha Flight. This is for sure the least obscure entry on the list, as I choose to talk about them constantly, and Alpha Flight has been somewhat reinvented in the last few years and changed into an international space force being led by Captain Marvel, but we are talking about the original team. First appearing in X-Men number 120, Alpha Flight was Canada's answer to the Avengers, with members with unique abilities from all over Canada. Unlike most super teams who are always working together, Alpha Flight operated in more of a Mission Impossible, James Bond kind of style, by choosing heroes from their roster and assigning each of them to specific missions that they would handle as individuals and pairs, only coming together as a full team in the case of extreme threats. Despite multiple tries by Marvel to give the team their own ongoing series, Alpha Flight has never quite caught on in the States. Perhaps they are just too specifically Canadian for a readership who tends to prefer American-centric stories, or maybe they just haven't been given the right push into the mainstream. Either way, Alpha Flight remains a team that not a huge amount of readers have heard of, and even fewer have actually read. Although, they did appear in one episode of the classic X-Men cartoon. Small victories. Number 9. ForceWorks. When it was determined that the Avengers' ever-expanding roster should be better divided up across the United States, rather than everyone working out of New York, the West Coast Avengers were formed. This experiment didn't end up working out, and the team was soon disbanded. In a typically Tony Stark move, Tony Stark decided that he should instead fund and create his own superhero team to help protect the West Coast. The resulting team was ForceWorks. The original team consisted of Iron Man, Spider-Woman, Wonder Man, and US Agent, with Scarlet Witch being chosen as the team leader. The team operated for a while, taking on threats like the Mandarin and Kang the Conqueror, but the team was plagued with internal issues. Despite Scarlet Witch being the team leader, Iron Man was constantly undermining her authority and forcing the team to carry out his personal vendettas. This attitude culminated in him forcing the team to brutally kidnap Hawkeye, which got him booted from the team. ForceWorks carried on without him for a while, but eventually decided to disband, although they were briefly brought back under the leadership of Maria Hill in order to fight the Robot Revolution. ForceWorks is an obscure offshoot of the already relatively obscure West Coast Avengers, however they did serve as the supporting cast for Iron Man's 90s animated series. Number 8. The Outlaws. Not to be confused with the team from DC Comics, Marvel's Outlaws are a group of heroes, all with a criminal past, who are led by Spider-Man and Silver Sable. The group formed when photographic evidence came out implicating Spider-Man in a robbery. Wanting to prove the innocence of the man who had helped them reform, Prowler, Rocket Racer, Will-O-the-Wisp, Paladin, and Sandman all began searching for evidence that would prove the webbed wall crawler's innocence. They discovered that Spidey was actually working for Silver Sable, and that what he had stolen was actually incriminating evidence against a member of the Magia crime family. Impressed with the group's skills, Silver Sable brought them on as freelancers, and the team would occasionally come together, usually whenever Spider-Man was being framed or something and needed support from outside of the Avengers. Although some of the various members of the team are relatively well-known characters, their team isn't well known, as they come together so rarely and haven't teamed up since 1991. Number 7. Psyforce. When a telepathic CIA agent named Emmett Proudhawk had a vision about 5 young people with psychic abilities being protected by a hawk, he decided to track down the people in his vision and bring them them together to become Psi-Force. He got most of them together but was killed by a Russian operative. The 5 psychic youths discovered that when they all touched Proudhawk's mystic medallion, it summoned a creature called the Psyhawk who would help them defeat their enemies. You know, like Captain Planet. The youths worked together to defeat an evil Russian paranormal named Rodstov, and they were chased by members of the CIA, the KGB, and a shadowy organization called the Medusa Web, who eventually brought the kids on as freelance agents. Although they had their own 32-issue series, the fact that this Marvel team has no recognizable superheroes and is based in Earth 148,611 rather than the mainstream Earth 616 universe keeps them pretty obscure. Number 6. Force of July. The first DC entry on this list, Force of July were an Americana-themed group who often found themselves at odds with the Outsiders. The Force answered to the American Security Agency and were tasked with eliminating anyone whose activities were deemed to be subversive to America's interests by any means necessary. Some of the team's members include Lady Liberty, Silent Majority, Sparkler, Mayflower, and their leader, Major Victory. Although they aren't technically villains, their fanatic patriotism prevented them from seeing that they were being manipulated by their handler, who was using them to help his scheme to create a satellite called Project Orwell that would have been used to spy on people using their televisions. This plot was stopped by the Outsiders, and the Force of July later found themselves fighting against the Suicide Squad, who killed Sparkler and Mayflower. The remaining members ended up joining the squad but did not last long on the team's roster. Number 5, the Inferior Five. Coming from Earth 12 in the DC Multiverse, this team are the Nepo babies of a team of heroes called the Freedom Brigade. When the Freedom Brigade retired, the heroes encouraged their children to follow in their footsteps, and they started a team dedicated to protecting the people of Megaopolis. Known as the Fearsome Five, the members of this team, Awkward Man, Blimp, Dumb Bunny, and Whitefeather, have somewhat useless and conflicting powers, and although they usually manage to save the day, it is usually a result of dumb luck rather than skill. Their lameness led to the people of Megalopolis calling their champions the Inferior Five, which the team eventually decided to adopt as their official name. In Crisis on Infinite Earths, their world was destroyed, and as a result they were sent to comic book Limbo, which is a realm similar to the Island of Misfit Toys, where characters who are written out of continuity remain until they're brought back into continuity. Number 4, the League of Losers. In the Marvel universe of Earth 6215, a time-traveling villain from the future named Kronoke used his knowledge of the past to travel back in time to the present with an army and kill all of Earth's mightiest heroes. Fortunately, the records he was working off of did not include any reference to these C-list Marvel characters because none of them had ever done anything that was worthy of note. Darkhawk, Speedball, Dagger, Terror, X-23, Gravity, and Sleepwalker were thus able to take on Kronoke and travel back to before the villain had stolen his time travel tech and stop him. Although this stranded the team in the future, it also created a divergent timeline known as Earth 2992, where the villain's scheme was never an issue. Wow, time travel can be such a pain to explain. Number 3, Section 8. One of the strangest teams in the DC universe, Section 8 is a group of what I will very generously call heroes who operate out of Gotham City. Each member of the team is more bizarre than the last, so buckle up. Shakes is a schizophrenic with a speech impediment. Jean de Baton is a stereotypical Frenchman who hits people with a baton. Defenestrator is a massive former Arkham inmate who carries around a window to smash over his enemies' heads. Flemgem spits massive amounts of snot at his enemies in order to blind them. Bueno Excelente is just some guy who sneaks up on his enemies and then essays them. Dog Welder is a crazy person who welds dogs to people's faces, and Friendly Fire is a hero who can shoot energy beams but is incapable of hitting anything he aims at, usually hitting his teammates instead. They are led by Sixpack, an alcoholic who pees himself and then attacks people with a beer bottle. Shockingly, this team has not gotten a big budget movie, and all of them were killed after an encounter with the mini-angled ones, with the exception of Sixpack, who suddenly manifested reality-warping powers to defeat the villains and save the world. Number 2, the Neo Knights. After having great success publishing comic books based on Hasbro's line of G.I. Joe toys, the two companies collaborated again to create the series that would give much-needed backstory for Hasbro's new line of toys, the Transformers. A lot of the Transformers mythology came from these comics, but due to the rights of certain characters remaining with the comic book company, not all of the elements were brought over for the television series or subsequent films. One of these elements is the superhero team, the Neo Knights. When the Autobots returned to space, leaving no one to protect their longtime ally, GB Blackrock, he decided to bring together a team of superpowered humans in order to fight any Decepticons that caused trouble on Earth. The members are Circuit Breaker, a woman who was paralyzed in an encounter with the Transformers and has developed a special suit that allows her to walk as well as fly and shoot repulsor beams. Also on the team are Thunder Punch, a man who can enlarge his feet and hands and punch with heightened strength, Rapture, a woman who can cause cause any sentient being to shut down and enter an elaborate fantasy in Dynamo, who could channel the planet's latent energies. They are extremely obscure, only showing up in the original US and UK Transformers comics, and due to Hasbro having the rights for most of the Transformers and Marvel owning the rights to this team, they are likely to remain so for quite some time. Number 1. The Forgotten Heroes. They may have more appearances than some of the other teams on this list, and some of their members are relatively well known, but with a name like the Forgotten Heroes, how could they not end up on the top spot for this list? The team consists of a bunch of DC heroes who all stumbled upon ancient golden pyramids. When the heroes tried to report what they had found, the US government disavowed them and ruined each of their reputations to discredit them. Immortal Man brought all the heroes together and filled them in that the pyramids were part of a scheme by Vandal Savage to kill Superman. They formed a team together and teamed up with the Man of Steel to stop Vandal's plot. The team lives up to its name with members like Atomic Knight, Ballistic Congo Bill, Cave Carson, Dolphin, The Ray, Vigilante and Resurrection Man, as well as a few slightly more well-known heroes such as Rip Hunter, Animal Man, and Rick Flag.
Number 10. Tosin Oduye. Tosin is such a cool character. Okay, so as a kid, Tosin Oduye saw the way that Wakanda became a socially isolated nation who believed themselves superior and seemed to always attract war. The Marube, the tribe Tosin belongs to, began to separate a bit from the main Wakandan people. They hated the way Wakanda used vibranium for tech, so they instead found a way to refine the vibranium and flow with it. They gave themselves vibranium tattoos, and some in their tribe, who trained hard enough, could have the vibranium flow with them, granting them some pretty cool powers. It's like they harness the energy of vibranium and can use it to move extremely fast, or unleash vibranium energy blasts, or even seemingly grant himself a vibranium armor. Last thing I want to say is that the covers for the issues of this volume of Black Panther are just so cool. Definitely check it out.
Number 9. Aleph Chernikov. Aleph Chernikov is a young mutant hero who appears in the Wolverine Patch flashback series by Larry Hama. This was a miniseries that came out earlier in 2022 and covered an untold tale from Patch's adventures in Madripoor back in the good old days. Here Patch works to help 3 Russian mutants who have escaped their government, but have been tracked to Madripoor. Madripoor's military, royal armed guards, as well as S.H.I.E.L.D. and Russia themselves appear to be after the mutants, but Patch, Archie, and Tiger intervene in hopes of helping the 3. In the end they do, and among them is Aleph, the child of the other 2 mutants, David and Reza. Aleph appears to be the main focus of everyone's efforts when it comes to hunting them down. They possess powerful healing abilities, psionic abilities, and possibly even the power to manipulate reality. But they're also a child, so of course everyone's like, we gotta protect this baby.
Number 8. Bitewing. There's nothing that wins me over more than a puppy. But then DC goes and gives a puppy a 3-legged gray blue-eyed Pipple puppy and gives it to Nightwing, probably one of the best members of the Bat family. And then they go and give it the nickname of Bitewing. I literally teared up just typing this part because of the overload of adorable that I got while looking at this. Haley the dog was being chased and mistreated by some teenagers when Dick Grayson stepped in, rescued, and adopted her. Now, the first sidekick turned full-on hero in DC Comics has his very own super pet, especially after she was given a costume and the ability to speak from a 5th-dimensional imp. Now, she fights alongside Nightwing as Bitewing, and it's cute. It's very cute.
Number 7. Escapade. I love Escapade, and I also love her BFF Morgan Red. While initially introduced as a criminal in the Marvel Voices Pride issue of this year, I think it's safe to say that Escapade and her friend Morgan and his genetically engineered flying turtle pal, Hibbert, will soon become a team of mutant heroes instead of anti-heroes. I mean, even if they are criminals who steal stuff, they really only try to steal stuff from the worst people, which makes them still pretty altruistic. Escapade is a trans mutant named Sheila Sexton, whose powers involve swapping places with whoever she decides to use her mutant powers on. This can be someone as low level as a random passerby, or someone as high level as another superpowered being who is about to defeat her, or even the President of the United States. So much potential for this power.
Number 6. Bolt. Since the live-action Black Adam movie was announced, DC decided that they would also put out a Black Adam solo series for the first time. And in the first issue, it puts Black Adam on the ropes of mortality. In response to this, Black Adam finds his descendant, Malik Adam White, a medical student living in the Bronx. Basically, Black Adam just tells this guy he is going to succeed Black Adam and inherit his power, and then he forces him by having one of his people pop a cap in Malik, and the only way to save himself is to take Black Adam's ring and say Shazam. While Black Adam calls Malik White Adam, Malik gives a good little lecture about the inherent racism there. So he prefers to go by Thunderbolt or just straight up Bolt. From what I've read, I really like his character, and he is supposed to represent a sort of form of redemption for the character of Black Adam because, as they say in the comic, there is no true redemption for Black Adam. Not at this point, at least.
Number 5. Amass. Amass is a really cool new mutant. They made their first appearance in Steve Orlando's Marauder series in issue number 4. Amass is a mutant of Threshold, the oldest mutant civilization to have ever existed. They, along with 2 other mutants, had their minds stored within a codex, hoping that they would arrive in the future after being restored and would be able to seek help for their people who were on the brink of extinction when they last left them in the past. Amass's mutant powers allowed them to physically combine mutants and their powers together, joining together to create one basically big ball of mutants, which kinda looks like one big being. Hence their mutant name of Amass. This appears to both psychologically and physically combine whichever mutants they choose with themselves, with their new combined form also possessing all the powers of said mutants, which I think is pretty nuts.
Number 4. Grey Wolf. Of the characters I'm talking about on this list, my favorites are absolutely a 3-way tie between Tosin, Bitewing, and this guy, Grey Wolf. Okay, so Lex Luthor was running a crime-fighting experiment around the world trying to create a group of his own similar to Batman Incorporated, with the ultimate goal of creating Abyss, his own Batman. But then he abandoned all these projects that then went wild doing their own thing. So Batman Incorporated's international team, being led by Ghostmaker, go on a mission to bring them down in Batman 2022 Annual Volume 3 Number 1 from July. Their first mission is to Kazbek, Chechnya, to take on Grey Wolf. Grey Wolf was unleashed on the city to help its citizens who had been exposed to Lazarus resin that had made them all extremely violent. With Ghostmaker, he was able to cure the residents and join Batman Inc. as a good guy, but he displayed enough skill to best Dark Ranger, El Gaucho, and Batman of Japan in a 3-on-1 fight, and he beat Wingman 1-on-1. Also, he's like 7 feet tall minimum. Super cool.
Number 3. Black Mist. Black Mist is a completely new character who is not yet a member of Batman Incorporated, but who might end up becoming one in the future. She was actually one of my favorite characters to appear in Batman Inc. issue number 1 from 2022. Not only does she look like a badass, but she also seems to be wary of joining up with Batman Inc. Black Mist appears as a sort of consulting detective in issue number 1 of the 3rd volume of this series. We don't know much about her yet, but she seems to be working with Batman Incorporated to help them solve the mystery behind just who is killing all the teachers of Batman and Ghostmaker, and why and how this perpetrator is doing that. One thing we do know about Black Mist straight out of the gate is that she seems to have history with the Knight. The two recognize each other and are presented as friendly to one another.
Number 2. Egro the Unbreakable. Okay, so this one definitely took me by a bit of a surprise. Coming out of the 2022 volume of Thunderbolts, specifically issue number 2, we are introduced to Egro. Egro is a super interesting little troll-looking monster who lives peacefully on Monster Isle. But you see, Egro heard of the monster exhibit at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, so naturally he expected to go and see his own statue. He just had to make sure that it captured his true beauty. But what the heck? They didn't have a statue for Egro the Unbreakable? An insult like that could not fly, so he obviously had to destroy the other statues for the other monsters, which brought the Thunderbolts to fight him. Instead, after Egro punched Power Man through the roof with his big lava hands and incapacitated Persuasion with his telepathic abilities, which helped him learn English, he surrendered to America Chavez and explained the situation. Then, he was invited to join the team. Yay! Happy ending for the little steroid Yoda.
Number 1. Nightmite. Just like Superman has Mr. Mxyzptlk and Batman has Batmite, Dick Grayson, the superhero known as Nightwing, now has his own imp superfan from the 5th dimension, Dixel, though Dixel prefers to be known as Nightmite. While it might seem strange to put an imp from the 5th dimension on a superhero list given, you know, some of their track records, Nightmite is genuinely well-meaning and helpful, unlike most other imps who are somewhat mischievous or just downright troublesome. Being an imp from the 5th dimension also means that Dixel can be super powerful, as he has magical, reality-bending, and warping powers. Nightmite made his first appearance very recently in the comics, as of the time of this recording, in issue number 98 of Nightwing, which was released in November of 2022.
And coming in at number 10, Vanish. Image Comics seems to be going back to its gritty, magical roots with Vanish. Vanish follows Oliver Harrison. This chosen one peaked at the age of 14 when he took down the leader of the biggest threat to his universe in a mystical place called the Everkeep. Now, as an adult, this chosen one indulges in every vice he can, living a mediocre, pretty sloppy life. Until a group of heroes show up called the Prestige, who are actually the followers of the threat that Oliver took down down when he was 14. Now, using his magical abilities, Oliver takes it on himself to play the part of a hero in the disguise of a villain to bring down the heroic prestige. The comic builds up this super cool magic but violent world. It's incredibly gritty but filled with dark fantasy and magic, and it's just so cool. Number 9. Rogue Son. Dylan Siegel has been living life with his mom when he's suddenly called to a reading of his estranged father's will. Now during that reading, he discovers his dear old dad was a superhero called Rogue Son, and now Dylan has been granted the superhero mantle for himself. Now this super angsty teen is in charge of protecting our world from the forces of the supernatural, while also trying to figure out who exactly took down his dad. The art in this story is awesome, and Rogue Son's suit is incredibly cool. With really cool fire-based abilities and a whole lot of family drama, Rogue Son from Image Comics is a fun story you should definitely check out. Number 8. Dr. Multiverse. Alright, breaking away from Image Comics now and landing firmly in DC's territory, we have Maya Chamara, Dr. Multiverse. Dr. Multiverse is alone in the multiverse, meaning there is only one of her. Originating from Earth 8, Maya was bathed in cosmic energies and was granted the powers of the multiverse, which basically means that she's able to see variants and alternate versions of people living in different realities. She can see people and objects passing between dimensions, and she has the ability to locate and track anything she has come into contact with throughout the multiverse. She also has access to vast energy manipulation abilities, which let her fire blasts and create shields, but she can totally open up portals to other universes and send people back to their own universe. This former member of the Retaliators became part of the Justice League Incarnate, using her multiversal powers to help this multiversal team of heroes. She's like a DC version of Marvel's Captain Universe, Starbrand, and America Chavez all just mixed into one, and I think she's pretty alright. If you guys are enjoying this video so far, make sure you drop a like to let us know you want more videos similar to this one. Just one little click's all you gotta do. Thanks. Number 7. Batwalker. I'm gonna be honest, I just assumed this had already been done in the past, but no. Dinosaur versions of DC superheroes had not been done before. I'm alright with this because that means this year we were treated to the Jurassic League, a DC story that takes place on an Earth where heroes like Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman are actually dinosaurs that protect the puny human race from the carnivore dinosaurs who would eat them. There's a Brachiosaurus Supersaur from another world who looks eerily like Superman, a Triceratops Wonder Dawn hailing from the Isle of Trimascara, and on the outskirts of Growltham City, we are introduced to Batwalker, an Allosaurus who dresses up like a bat after the loss of his parents at the hands of an insane Dilophosaurus who goes by the name Jokerzard. I mean, there's even a panel of this comically green Allosaurus throwing a stone batarang, and it's just something that I never knew I needed in my life until this point. I'm just so glad it exists. Number 6. The Spirit of Variance, Vox Igni. Sean Cassidy is not a new character by any stretch of the imagination, but in Legion of X number 7 by Marvel, he does become something completely new. Sean was betrayed by Moira McTaggart, who stole his face so she could enter into Krakoa. So when he was brought back to life, he was rather upset. Now there's a whole thing going on as well with the character of Legion right now that I just can't get into, but essentially a character named Mother Righteous offers Legion a gift in the form of a certain kind of power. David Haller refuses this gift, but luckily for us, Sean Cassidy was there to take it instead. Making a deal with Mother Righteous, Cassidy was given, or I guess possessed by, a cast out spirit of vengeance called the Spirit of Variance. This transformed Banshee into a flaming skull version of himself named Vox Igni, which is the voice of fire, and if a name like that doesn't sound cool to you, then just look at this character. Good golly, he's awesome. Number 5. Bat Prince. Another alternate version of Batman, I know, but he belongs to probably one of my favorite alternate reality stories to come out of DC Comics, Dark Knights of Steel. This story takes place in a world of medieval fantasy where the Wayne family ruled their kingdom until the mother and father of Superman came to Earth. The L family house became rulers of the land after a horrible attack on the Wayne family. Now, as the surviving son of the Waynes, Bruce serves as both a knight and son to the L family. With his network of Robins and his brilliant mind, But as the world is at each other's throats in this story, this Bat Prince learns about the actions that led to his birth and the powers he now possesses as a half Kryptonian Dark Knight. Dark Knights of Steel that came out this year in 2022 just has so many interesting and fresh takes on classic DC characters. It's fresh and fun, and I got a variant cover of the first issue and it looks so sweet. Maybe one day I'll let you guys see it. Maybe. But definitely read this story. Definitely do it. Number 4, Miracle Man. Miracle Man is also not a new character. In fact, Marvel's Miracle Man is one of comics' most dramatic publishing debacles, coming back from 1954. Decades of rights battles over the character meant that he kind of bounced around publishers and then disappeared from the pages of comics altogether for a long time. Which is why it seemed way too good to be true when Marvel announced in 2013 that it had acquired the rights to Miracle Man. Now, over the years, the company has attempted to bring the character back, but even more legal issues kind of stopped that from being able to happen. But luckily, starting in October 2022, Neil Gaiman finally continued the Silver Age arc that he had created for the character, with Marvel planning a number of other Miracle Man books. So now, after all this time, we get both one of the newest and kind of one of the oldest characters all wrapped up into one awesome Miracle Man, Marvel Man, Mickey Moran, whatever you want to call him, shaped package. Number 3, Abyss. Alright, before you jump on me in the comments, this isn't the villain Abyss. That guy was Lex Luthor's own evil Batman, who was honestly kinda cool, but he did not last very long. Abyss was defeated by Batman, who got some massive help from a Bodnesian police officer named Detective Kea, who helped Batman not only survive, but even forced Abyss to retreat after he had defeated most of Batman Incorporated, which led him straight into a defeat at the hands of the Dark Knight himself. Now, after Abyss had been defeated, Kaya found some of the villain's equipment and decided to hunt down the ones who had ended her parents' lives. There's a lot of parallels between Batman and the characters in and around him in the later issues of Batman Volume 3 that came out this year in 2022. Anyways, Batman offered to help Kaya, but in helping her, he also talked her into just arresting the criminals instead of doing what she was planning to do, which I'm sure you can imagine what that was. She wasn't brought into Batman Inc., but she is now another ally of Batman, and I hope she gets some more appearances in the comics from this point on because the costume's pretty cool. Number 2, the Joneses. How about a whole family of superheroes for this spot? And not just that, but also some social and political commentary wrapped up into it. That sounds like so much fun. Not really. Anyways, out of AWA Studios comes The Joneses, which is a spin-off of another AWA Studios comic called The Resistance, and it focuses on a suburban family who have gained superpowers after a global pandemic known as the Great Death. All 4 family members, mother, father, sister, and brother, were all transformed into something superhuman, but unfortunately, the world has begun to embrace fascism, born of fear of the pandemic and the superpowered individuals that have appeared, known as the Reborns. The Joneses face some pretty scary consequences if they are exposed as Reborns, and so they are presented with the dilemma of using their abilities for good at the risk of exposing themselves and inviting danger, or just laying low and staying out of the way. It's an interesting little idea for a comic book, and the global pandemic idea seems a little bit familiar. I don't know why. So I found it fun to just jump into this little 2022 comic from AWA Studios, and maybe you will too. Number 1, Guts and Glory. If you're part of the Thunderbolts, are you really a hero? Yes you are. The problem for me and this list is that when Guts and Glory first appeared in Thunderbolts Volume 4 number 1 from August 2022, we weren't really given much information on the guy, and we still haven't been really, which makes my job way harder. He was placed on Hawkeye's Thunderbolts team under the mayor of New York, Luke Cage. The only reason given for this character's introduction to the team was that apparently having a, quote, man of mystery would do wonders for the team's public relations. That's actually the reason. There's literally nothing else given about why he's here. He is a big stocky guy with cyborg body parts and an absolutely insane amount of weaponry, including a particle rupture laser, which I don't even want to imagine what that thing does to a person. It just sounds horrible. He also looks a bit like Cable, as he's a totally 90s cyber inspired warrior, but just more military and not nearly as old as Cable, with absolutely no information about his backstory, again, or his training. Thank you. Thank you so much, Marvel. Please change this. Gutson is cool, okay? Thank you. Number 10, Zato. In 2021 and 2022, we got the 28th and 29th seasons of Power Rangers. Power Rangers Dino Fury. The Red Ranger and leader of the Dino Fury Rangers, Zato, is courageous and compassionate, strengthened by the support of his teammates and his new experiences on Earth. Zato has truly grown into his role as a leader, but he doesn't really need to grow into anything because Zato here is actually not a human. He's a Rafkonian from the planet Rafkon, and he led the ancient Dino Fury Rangers 65 million years ago. So he's got quite a bit of experience under his belt. In 2023, we get the Cosmic Fury Rangers team, which is one of the rare times where the cast of a Rangers show from the previous 2 seasons go on to remain the Rangers for the next evolution of the Rangers franchise, and Zato will return as the Cosmic Fury Zenith Ranger, dressed in all white like his Dino Fury Ghost Ranger form, which happened when he was taken out and revived by the Morphin Masters. Number 9, Aeon. But Zato wasn't the only new Ranger from Dino Fury. Going over all the other Rangers seems like cheating for this list, but there is one Ranger who joined the team later that I thought was pretty cool. The Dino Fury Gold Ranger, Aeon. Aeon was also a Rafkonian just like Zato, and they even knew each other all those millions of years ago. Upon being cornered while fighting against Tidemare, Zato and the others witness the arrival of the mysterious Gold Ranger, who comes to assist them, and then later on, he reveals himself, explaining to Zato that he managed to escape the destruction of Ultrazord along with Zato during the Great Sporix Wars before being stranded and put to sleep in the sea for 65 million years. Aeon was reawakened by the Green Morphin Master, and just like Zato, Aeon's Rafkonian physiology gives him access to telepathic powers like retrocognition, memory reading, and memory transferal, plus somehow super eyesight. He is set to be the Cosmic Fury Gold Ranger when that season releases in September of 2023. In at number 8, Steel Silva. Before we had Dino Fury, we had Beast Morphers in 2019 and 2020, and for me, one member of this Ranger team stands out among the rest of the normal Humies. The Grid Battle Force Silver Ranger, Steel Silva. Steel is actually a robot, or should I say, he was a robot. He was created by the Gold Ranger of the team, Nate Silva. The robot absorbed human DNA from Nate and DNA from a scarab beetle, and this transformed it into the Silver Ranger, and technically Nate's brother. The bot had not been given a name until he addressed himself as, quote, Mr. Fantastic, super handsome, strong as steel. But Nate told him, just stick with Steel, and so Steel Silva was born. Eventually, Steel sacrificed himself to drain Evox of most of his power by taking a devastating double energy attack to his stomach, which ultimately destroyed him. But it wasn't the end, as Master Green of the Morphin Masters saw his heroic sacrifice and resurrected Steel as a human so he could continue on as the Silver Ranger. Number 7, Matthew Cook. Nearly every other Ranger in the history of the franchise has had to deal with the burden of balancing their personal lives with their superhero activities. But this doesn't seem to be a problem for the newest Green Ranger, Matthew Cook. Matthew was another classmate of the original Mighty Morphin Rangers, and when he realized who they were, he confronted them on it, eventually becoming the new Green Ranger in place of Tommy Oliver, who became the White Ranger. When Lord Zed trapped the citizens of Angel Grove with an energy bubble, like you do, the Green Ranger revealed himself as Matthew to the rest of the people in order to improve morale, but with the added benefit of now being a well-known hero in the community. Unfortunately, he does seem to join Lord Zed's army and betray his friends, but I kinda doubt this is a legit thing. Number 6, the Ranger Slayer. Kimberly Hart was not a new character. She was actually the original Mighty Morphin Pink Ranger, and the Ranger that all the other guys in school had a crush on. But she is straight up a total badass. But for this point on the list, I want to talk about the Kimberly Hart of a different reality. In said alternate reality, the world of the Coinless, this version of Kimberly became a deadly Ranger named the Ranger Slayer under the mind control of the incredibly powerful Lord Drakon. As the Ranger Slayer, Kimberly piloted the Gravezord and was also the leader of the Promethea Rangers team, which included another powerful Ranger, Magna Defender, one of my favorites. She also wielded the bow/sword of darkness, and the Ranger Slayer initially worked for Lord Drakon before breaking free of his mind control. After Drakon's fall, the Ranger Slayer takes the place of Lord Drakon in the new timeline. Number 5, the original Omega Rangers. The Omega Rangers are a small but ancient faction or team of rangers that are specifically around to operate in the most dangerous and most remote areas of space, and they're powered by the classical elements of fire, water, earth, and air. Now originally, the team was around many millennia ago on the Morphin Master's homeworld of Safe Haven. They were originally composed of Bledsoe, the Red Ranger of Fire, Apophy, the Black Ranger of Air, the Purim Yellow Ranger of Earth, Haza, the Blue Ranger of Water, and one other, Spark, the Gold Ranger who represented the sun. But Spark, having learned the pain that comes with loss when he lost one of his fellow rangers, turned on the remaining rangers, being taken over by the possibilities of having death-defying powers. He became the Death Ranger, which, if you've seen our most powerful ranger video, is one of the most powerful rangers out there, even if he's evil. Despite that though, the Omega Rangers were able to stop and imprison Spark until he came back at a later date, as tends to be the case with most villains. Number 4, the Shattered. Going back to that whole Kimberly Hart thing, the followers of Drakon, his ranger sentries, most of whom have been lost without someone to follow, have tried to live normal lives in the new world under the rule of Kimberly Hart, the Ranger Slayer. But they find themselves in conflict with those who fought against Lord Drakon, people called the Coinless, who hold quite a bit of resentment against the sentries. So, while Kimberly is dealing with that conflict between those two factions, she learns of an old prison created by Drakon called the Deadlock. Leading her forces on a raid of the prison to free its prisoners, Kimberly stumbles upon a hidden cell holding an incredibly capable and mysterious prisoner, a ranger in a metal suit who it turns out to be Jason Lee Scott, the original Red Ranger. His rescue from the prison prompted a message to be sent out that brought Eclipta, the emissary of Dark Spectre, to the planet. Now, using a Black Dragon Zord's hand as a new Morphin diffuser, like the one that Drakon used to make the sentries in the first place, Kimberly convinced the other surviving rangers, Jason, Trini, and Zack, to use their coins to give literally everyone a portion of the Ranger power, putting them all on the grid and making them the Shattered, a whole army of Ranger-powered people. They put the beat down on Eclipta before the coins shattered and everyone went back to normal. Number 3, the Morphonaut. This is kind of a cheat, as the Ranger the Morphonaut becomes is not really new. This Ranger was a mysterious figure whose identity was unrevealed. They appeared in both Power Rangers in Space and Power Rangers Turbo. The Phantom Ranger hailed from the same homeworld as Zordon, known as Eltar. Now in the comics though, we learn that before he was known as the Phantom Ranger, this Ranger had a different alias, the Morphonaut. As the Morphonaut, over 10,000 years ago in the past, he was trapped inside the Morphin grid as a preventative measure to protect others from the evil that lurked around its perimeters. Hundreds of years in the past, the Morphonaut ended up being freed from the Morphin grid and would go on to help the Squadron Rangers in their fight against the Dark Spectre. Eventually, the Morphonaut became corrupted by the Dark Spectre, which he chose to do in order to protect the Squadron Rangers. His armor turned black, and although the Squadron Rangers would later defeat Dark Spectre, freeing the Morphonaut from their influence, the Morphonaut's armor would remain black, and they would take on the name of Phantom Ranger in their new form. Number 2, the Emissaries. The Emissaries are ancient warriors that represent the Morphin Masters, an ancient civilization dedicated to studying the Morphin grid. Now they each represent a different Ranger color, red, yellow, and blue, and what's cool about them is that they don't really have one solid form. They're constantly phasing in between different Ranger forms, taking on different Rangers from over the years, like Ninja Storm Red or Time Force Blue, etc, etc. These Emissaries actually used to be Rangers themselves, the Squadron Rangers, but during their battle with Dark Spectre, like we talked about before, they essentially become conduits of the grid, just letting its power consume them completely until they became one with it. Now, as these celestial beings, the Emissaries are supremely powerful guardians of the grid that exist outside of the realm of time and space, observing events across time and watching over the various Ranger teams that fight to protect their worlds. Such a cool concept. Finally, in at number 1, it's Yale of Sard. Okay, honestly, had no idea that a feline could be a Power Ranger, but I am so glad that that's the case. This is awesome. Okay, so Yale is a cat-like alien from the planet of Sard. Yale was originally the runt of the litter, which actually allowed him to survive when the rest of the family did not. Yale became empowered by the Morphin grid, which inadvertently caused a massive explosion and had the Omega Ranger arrive on Sard to apprehend the little cat. What's interesting is that Yale actually proved too strong for these already incredibly powerful Omega Rangers. Yale was eventually depowered and became like a pet for the Omega Rangers, living on their ship with them and eventually saving the leader, Zack, from the Horrid. But eventually Yale comes into contact with the Blue Omega Morpher thanks to a mysterious figure, the Blue Emissary, like we talked about before. And man, Yale is such a cool looking Blue Ranger. His strength and forgiveness make him an excellent addition to the Omega team.
Grotesque was once a prince that lived in the underground realm of Subterranea. He is also so hard to kill. His first big fight that we got to see was against the X-Men. Grotesque was the last living member of his kingdom. An earthquake caused by Dr. Hunt destroyed the underground civilization, and of course one survivor remained, Grotesque. He rightfully guessed that the above world caused the earthquake and came up to avenge his people. He learned of the earthquake machine and decided to use that to destroy the above world. He confronts the X-Men and the X-Men defeat him because Professor X used his mental power to stop the machine. Frustrated, Grotesque slammed himself into the machine to get it to work again, but that actually caused it to explode. The X-Men thought that the explosion killed him and Professor X. They were wrong. Professor X wasn't actually there. It was actually Changeling that had been pretending to be Professor X under Professor X's command, and well, Grotesque just can't die, so he went on to fight Miss Marvel. She also hit him with something that should have killed him. He survived and fought the Avengers, and then later Thor. In the Thor brawl, there was again a large energy blast that should have killed him, but didn't. Not really. His body was gone, but his spirit remained. His loyal captive followers, the Lava Men, took that spirit and put it in an impenetrable armor, and he went on to fight the X-Men again, this time in San Francisco. Nightcrawler found the cheat code to defeat Spirit Armor Grotesque. He took off his helmet. His spirit was released from the suit and dissolved. With his track record though, I wouldn't be surprised if Grotesque appeared alive in a few years. Pretty Boy is more than just a punk pretty face. He has some pretty cool cybernetic implants that can expand to be 3 times their length. If you don't think he is pretty cool, he can just use his mind control powers to fix that. He gets access to a person's brain using these fiber optic filaments in his eyes. Then he kind of reprograms you. Pretty Boy is known for his affiliation with Donald Pierce. He was a member of the mercenary group Pierce created called the Reavers. While on this team, he passed away for the first time. Big moment in every Marvel character's journey, but like most Marvel heroes and villains, his death did not stick and he was soon back in action. The second passing happened under the leadership of Deathstrike and he was put 6 feet under by Logan, but again it didn't stick and the guy was back in action brawling against the X-Men. Eventually, by the end of the battle with the X-Men, he was arrested. The character debuted in 1988's Uncanny X-Men 229. A bonus story in Marvel Tales Volume 2, issue 262, featured the X-Men sparring against a pretty interesting group. They were known as the Desert Dwellers. Their leader was Sunstroke. He claimed he was created when a man's sense of strategy was melded with the power of the Daystar. I'm assuming the Daystar is the sun. Combining with the sun in this case gave Sunstroke the ability to create and absorb light and heat. The creation of the heat also allows the guy to fly. Sunstroke, like the X-Men, fights with a team, the Desert Dwellers. We'll actually get more into one member in a later video, but for now, there are 3 other things on the team. I say things, not people, because they were a cactus, stone, and lizard made into humanoid villain versions of themselves. Squadcles. The Desert Dwellers fought the X-Men when the X-Men were traveling through the desert. The Desert Dwellers attack the X-Men, but they don't actually care that they attack the X-Men flying plane. They just have been taking down flights for supplies. It's in this fight we learn that Sunstroke needs the sun to activate his powers, so Storm creating clouds made him almost fall from the sky. Honestly, the Desert Dwellers are doing a pretty good job. Wolverine gets chucked into a mountain at one point, but the day is saved when Banshee shows up, screams, and the Desert Dwellers can't handle it, so they retreat. Collective Man is just so interesting to me. The villain is actually 5 people merged into one, specifically 5 brothers from China. When they merge together, they apparently gain a connection to everyone in China. You heard that right. Everybody. The connection allows Collective Man, as the brother mashup is called, to draw on power from any Chinese person they want. Drawing on 10,000 people one time gave the Collective Man enough strength to handle Sasquatch. It's not all sunshine and rainbows though. The brothers almost died from absorbing too many people's life forces at one time. I think that's karma right there. The brothers also have another very odd ability. They can make any Chinese person a clone of a brother and then merge with them. They have a hive mind, meaning they can mentally speak to just each other, but if they want to speak the old-fashioned way but are a few miles away from each other, they can just teleport to wherever their brother happens to be. It turns out you may need to prepare for trouble, make it double, as there are no rules when it comes to combining. You don't have to be like 5 brothers in one, you can go 2 brothers together, 3 brothers together, 4, 1, it doesn't matter. You can get different size of the villain persona. The brothers fought the X-Men when the X-Men were in town to look into Zorn. The 5 made it very hard to do so as they created an army of themselves to attack the X-Men. I just can't believe the brothers merged together and are able to then call on the power of all of China. Okay, so in the Marvel Universe there is Man-Ape, that is M'Baku, but this ain't about him even though he is more popular. We are looking at Ape-Man, and also briefly touching on the concept of the Ani-Men. So Ape-Man was a human, Gordon Kiefer, that dressed in an ape suit. He had a pretty iconic start to his career. He tried to rob Stark Industries, obviously failed, and went to jail. But his ape thing worked in his favor. Criminal mastermind, the organizer, was starting something called the Ani-Men, a team made up of other animal or insect-themed villains. Ape-Man was a natural fit for the squad, and so Catman, also a team member, broke him out of jail. There have been many Ani-Men, but the team that started it off and surrounded Ape-Man was him, Catman, Frogman, and Birdman. They fought against the X-Men in X-Men 94. The Ani-Men showed up to take over a military base and the X-Men said nope. It's in this comic that it's shown that Count Nefaria did some experimentation on the Ani-Men to make them more like their animal counterparts and significantly less human. Ape-Man becomes way stronger than he used to be. The fight with the X-Men doesn't go well for the heroes at first. The reason? They're too tired. The X-Men get it together though, and in the process, Ape-Man gets to experience Storm's power firsthand. The X-Men do come out on top, which really isn't shocking in the slightest. Ape-Man does meet his end eventually due to an explosion. Bloody Bess, she is a queen, she is a mother, she deserves attention. She is a pirate, and currently little is known about her past. Her present is a different story. The woman is a pirate. She is part of the Crimson Pirates. The Crimson Pirates and the X-Men first went mutant abilities to Sword when the pirates were temporary allies with Goth, a shifty guy involved with unethical trading. The allies assisted with releasing someone that really should have stayed in X-Men custody. The X-Men ended up fighting the Allies, and of course Bloody Bess and the X-Men were winning, but there was some possession involved and the X-Men were captured. Bloody Bess was in charge of keeping that section of the team in check. The team was taken to this market and then things went south from there for the pirates. Goth was no more by the end of the battle and Bess, along with the other pirates, fled. The Crimson Pirates stuck together and worked as kind of like mercs for hire. Bloody Bess, as a pirate, is very good at sword fighting, but she also has telepathic powers. She once tried to use the powers to connect with Omega Black for an assignment, but instead let the Shadow King loose. The king possessed her fellow pirates and they attacked her. She called to Nightcrawler for help. They had a little thing going on. He arrived, the X-Men arrived, the X-Men also then got possessed, and Nightcrawler and Bess had to fight together to save the day. Last we know of Bloody Bess, she has dedicated her days to finding her old pirate friends. All in all, a very cool character on a cool team, and yet she has less than 10 appearances. She debuted in the year 2000 and her last appearance was in 2015, so hopefully she gets picked back up soon. Back when Hank McCoy, Beast, was being recruited by Professor X to join the X-Men, there was another guy who wanted to get Beast on his side. His name was Orlando Furio and he wanted to conquer the world. He wanted Hank on his side so bad, he kidnapped him and his parents. He used Hank's parents as leverage to get Hank to steal a mini energy reactor. The reactor was used to power a machine that was designed to create global disasters. The good news is the X-Men eventually arrived and made sure the machine would never even once be used, and they freed Hank and his parents. The machine exploded and the guy, Conquistador, was caught in the destruction and presumably also exploded. He really committed to the bit though, the Conquistador. He carries around a sword designed to look like what the actual Conquistadors would have had. It splits into a 3-pronged stun weapon that really hurts if its blast is directed at you. Not only does he dress like a Conquistador, but he managed to find a bunch of other people that were also willing to dress like Conquistadors to be his henchmen. He operates out of a building that was either from that time or built in that fashion. No one is doing it like him anymore. Bring back villains that had a theme and stuck to it like it was on sale at Party City. Honestly, I don't want to see any more villains that just wear all black and have pointy faces. I want camp, I want drama, and I want people to have a brand. So this next guy, his name is Thug, and that's what he is. He looks like a robot cowboy that has seen better days. Thug made a name for himself in the comics as part of Loeb's team. Loeb was very interested in the science behind humans turning into mutants even though they were born with no X gene. Thug assisted in Scalp Hunter's capture and along the way fought various X-Men. He came head to head with the X-Men again later during the Experience Substance promotional gala. Thug is not a mutant, he is a human cyborg. He had been working close to John Sublime and received cybernetic enhancements from him. Their purpose was to mimic mutant powers. They made him very hard to hurt. He was resistant to most attacks pain-wise, but you can clearly hurt the guy if the array of scars on him or anything to go off of. Probably the most interesting thing to me that would be just so useful when in a fight is the fact that Loeb was able to download info about the X-Men, who they are, and how they fight into his brain. He downloaded that into Thug, so Thug had a better chance at fighting them. Very cool. This Thug debuted in Uncanny X-Men 515 in 2009, but there are other Thug characters. They are green, and they have no correlation to 616 Thug. The villain El Tigre debuted in X-Men 25 in 1966. His human name is Juan Moros, and he was a treasure hunter. Specifically, he focused on treasures from the ancient world. He is a menace. That is literally what he is described as on the cover of his debut comic. In that comic, he finds an amulet that belonged to the Mayan sky god. It gives him an array of powers like telepathy, telekinesis, and something called precognition, knowing if danger is coming or near. El Tigre with all these powers only exists when he has part of the sky god's amulet. When both pieces are put together, he just turns into the sky god. X-Men issue 25 explains this whole journey. In issue 26, we see a fight between the X-Men and El Tigre, with the X-Men trying to get the amulet off. They do, of course, succeed, and El Tigre is back to himself again and arrested. He later reappears to fight off against Khazar in issues 3, 4, and 5 of Volume 2, but issue 5 is where El Tigre has met his match in the form of the Mystic Mist. The mist causes him to evolve to the state of death, and he falls off a cliff. We do see a very old, very still body, so I think it's safe to say El Tigre is permanently resting. But you never know. The Neo race is made of super mutants, and we are looking at super mutant Salvo. He was part of the Neo War clan that brawled with the X-Men. It happened toward the beginning of the war between humans and mutants. The war kicked off when all the mutant powers were removed by the High Evolutionary, but you probably know that already. He survived the scrap with the X-Men. He didn't survive Magneto. He tried to attack him. He was torn apart. Why did Salvo attack the Master of Magnetism, one of the most powerful mutants? I don't know. If I were made of solid metal, which is what Salvo is made of, I simply would not have done that. I have a lot of questions about this guy. One thing about Salvo is the metal. He can turn into like guns on his arms, and he draws the ammo from his body. But if he does that, would he eventually disappear? I have to wonder, because I imagine the only thing he has to draw from himself is himself. Is he just shooting pieces of himself? And would said ammo stay as metal forever, or would you be left with toes on the ground? I feel like these are valid questions, but would this mean he has a very powerful healing factor if he were to regenerate every atom he's lost in a fight? Lots of questions for a character that I will probably never see again.
Number 10. Unis the Untouchable. Unis the Untouchable. What a wild character. An oldie and a goodie. Unis actually first appeared back in the original X-Men run, making his first appearance back in X-Men issue number 8, which after hundreds of X-Men issues is pretty old at this point. Unis himself is what he sounds like. His mutant powers allow him to become untouchable when he wishes, shielding him completely when activated. This psionic repulsion shield that he can create can be as thick or thin as he wants. Unis, whose current civilian name is Gunther Bane, has also been shown to be capable of reaching through the shield himself if needed, without dropping it entirely. Pretty powerful. It's not so powerful if someone comes and tries to make the shield something you have to deal with all the time, which is how they defeated him the first time though. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we are doing here, if you love obscure X-Men villains like me, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. Number 9. Nemesis. This character rose to notoriety under a different name and is commonly referred to and known by that codename, but we can't say it here on YouTube, so instead we're gonna go with this other name, Nemesis, which is also a very AOA name, so yeah. Nemesis is known in the Age of Apocalypse reality for being the son of Apocalypse. At least, the alleged son of Apocalypse. I think we pretty much know at this point. We also don't know who his mother is though, so that's still a mystery. But it probably wasn't the woman we now know as Apocalypse's wife in the main continuity, thanks to modern X-Men books, Genesis. Which is also kind of a confusing name for her to have in regards to apocalypses and X-Men history, but anyways. Nemesis, being an ally and horseman of Apocalypse, ends up being a major antagonist and problem for the X-Men in this universe, who are led by Magneto, as Professor X is dead in AOA, which is kinda, you know, what helped bring about this whole dread alternate reality of Earth 295, aka Age of Apocalypse. Number 8. Dark Riders. Oh boy, the Dark Riders. What a weird group. No wonder we haven't seen them that much. The Dark Riders are believed to be Inhumans who for some reason allied themselves with Apocalypse, seemingly believing in his vision of a mutant-dominated world and his ideology of survival of the fittest. I don't know how Apocalypse convinced them that this was a good idea, but they do seem to be pretty into it, I'd say, so I gotta assume that he was just like really persuasive and didn't just straight up threaten them. But still, it's a whole weird thing. The Dark Riders, they're weird. The original roster included team members Foxbat, Gauntlet, Tusk, Hard Drive, Synapse, and Barrage. I mean, I feel like that also just says it all. Listen to those names. The Dark Riders. Number 7. Cassandra Nova. I love Cassandra Nova. With every issue of Marauders I am reading, I fall more in love with this strange and terrifying character. Cassandra Nova is basically Charles Xavier's evil twin, but she's also not a straight up evil twin. She is what the Shi'ar would actually call a Mumadrai. The Shi'ar believe that Mumadrai are basically evil twin spirits of newborns who must be defeated before said person can be born. So the idea with that is that like basically we all before we were born fought an evil version of ourselves. They serve to represent the exact opposite of everything that we are. So in the case of Xavier, who is often presented as being a pretty good guy, though you know, not always, Cassandra is pretty evil in comparison. While Xavier did successfully defeat her before he came into the world with his telepathic mutant powers manifesting while he was in the womb, because of his own psionic potential, Cassandra herself was powerful enough to survive this and eventually would return years later to fight against Xavier and his beloved mutants. Although in being Charles's twin, she herself is also basically a mutant, so yeah. She's a mutant, but she's also Mumadrai. Number 6. Nimrod. If we're talking about the new Nimrod, he is well known thanks to the current era, but even he is still somewhat obscure as an X-Men villain, considering that, you know, he hasn't been around for too long and only appears in a few issues at this point. However, even going back and talking about the more famous Nimrod from the Days of Future Past reality, for those who are not familiar, this could actually still be a version of the character who is considered obscure. The main Days of Future Past reality is often considered to be Earth 811, which is where Nimrod hails from. Here, and even in the current main timeline of Earth 616, Nimrod is considered to be a super sentinel, a super advanced mutant killing and detecting machine. So if you thought the Sentinels were bad, woo, wait till you meet Nimrod. He's crazy, even though his name is kinda dumb. That's why I love him though. Number 5. Harold Leland. Despite having recently returned, Harold is usually someone often left out when it comes to his involvement with the previous villainous group known as the Hellfire Club. Or well, you know, he's kind of more, he's like on the side. Like Harry's there, but maybe in the back. Well, really, the Hellfire Club has become two different entities at this point now as well, with one remaining pretty villainous and the other being a somewhat altruistic Krakoan-based business known as the Hellfire Trading Club. Prior to Harry's resurrection on Krakoa though, he was a pretty bad guy and member of the Hellfire Club, back when it was made up of villains, before it was, you know, just about business and mutants and all that stuff. Throughout many of his Hellfire days, Leland was often seen as the right-hand man to more well-known mutant villain, Black King of the Hellfire Club, Sebastian Shaw. And those were also back in the days when the Hellfire Club just wanted to like rule the world. Although who knows, maybe the trading company does want to rule the world. That would be an interesting twist. Number 4. Charles Xavier II, or Charles Xavier II. Charles Xavier II is the child of Mystique and Professor X. Wait. What? Yep, at one point these two had a child together, and in the main continuity too. That happened. Well, we don't really know fully what happened to this child in the main continuity, who I feel like we kinda just forgot about, who Mystique also gave up for adoption, surprise surprise. We do know of an alternate version of the character who actually gets a bit of a story in the reality of Earth 13729, where he joins up with his half-brother Reyes and basically becomes a villain. So that's the version we're focusing on for this point. Charles Xavier II accidentally kills his adoptive mother when his powers emerge, causing him to seek out his birth mother, Mystique. However, she is no longer around because she has been killed at this point by his half-brother, Reyes. Charles II then decides to create his own team of X-Men, believing that the current team has disgraced his father's name, who is also dead at this point. However, he's not a very good guy at all, and instead of inspiring a team of mutants to, you know, be better, he just uses mind control to get them to join him, giving them just enough awareness and control to kind of realize what's happening to them, but not enough that they can actually do anything about it. Yikes, that's really evil, man. That's really evil. Like, he could have just mind controlled them and been like, then you just won't be aware. But no, he was like, I want you to know what's happening. Number 3, Horticulture. Horticulture are such an awesome group of villain ladies. I really hope they do continue to appear for years to come and become super mainstream and not obscure. Like, I want to see them in the MCU. They deserve a live action adaptation despite being pretty new. They made their first appearance in the 2019 X-Men series in issue number 3 and are a group of villainous women who plan to take over the world by controlling seeds and crops. In essence, they hope to drastically diminish the human population of Earth to return the world to a more natural state, thereby deciding through controlling seeds and crops as botanical scientists who will live and who will die. Number 2, Lucifer. Lucifer is another super old school villain who you may have forgotten about, or you never knew about to begin with perhaps. But you know who didn't forget? I didn't forget. I did not forget back when Professor X weirdly implied that Lucifer, as in maybe the devil at the time that he was bringing it up, was the one behind him losing the ability to walk. That happened at one point, and I was like, what is happening here? Now, Lucifer is not actually Satan though. He's not that Lucifer. He's actually an alien from outer space. I don't think it makes it better. Lucifer is a Quist from the planet Quistelium. He originally came to Earth to conquer it, but was foiled by Xavier, so he basically dropped a big rock on him. I'm not joking, that's pretty much what happened. Although initially implied to maybe be the devil, we later learn he is just a super advanced and intelligent alien dude. Though not too intelligent because, you know, the X-Men do defeat him. Number 1, Cordyceps Jones. Cordyceps Jones is one of the newest villains to pester the X-Men. He actively fought against the most recently retired roster in the current run, before Forge, Firestar, Iceman, Magic, and Havoc joined the team. Cordyceps Jones, however, only recently went up against the X-Men, having targeted Earth by putting a bounty on it after encouraging people to gamble on its destruction at one of his massive cosmic casinos, Game World. Prior to that, he made his first appearance in the 2017 Rocket series in issue number 4, which is also why Rocket was the one to help the X-Men with finding Game World and infiltrating it. Thankfully, they had a direct link to him through a team member at the time, Rogue, whose husband Gambit is a fellow friend of Rocket's through their shared love of gambling. We also learned in their pursuit of Game World and Cordyceps Jones that Gambit's secret nickname for Rocket is Small Blind. Cordyceps Jones might be newer in the comics, having appeared in less than 10 issues at the time of this recording, but he's actually an ancient threat, being over 30,000 years old and also being a giant parasitic fungal spore. He and obscure Wolverine villain Spore actually could probably do some crazy damage should they ever team up. That would be pretty wild. Number 10, Donald Blake. Donald Blake may be one of the characters fans of Thor in the comic are most familiar with of those on our list. He has made more appearances than others for sure, but he is better known in the comics as a version of Thor and later as his ally as opposed to his enemy. Donald Blake sort of used to be Thor, but then he became his own separate entity, but then he still helped Thor. However, in recent years, Donald Blake has become the enemy of Thor after he was locked away in a fantasy realm. Having learned the truth of his false existence there, he called to Thor for help, but when Thor never answered, Blake began to unravel, believing that Thor had abandoned him. He started to strike out first at those who he could, the fake beings living inside the dream reality with him. But once free from reality and back in the real world, Blake came after as many Thors as he possibly could as he sought revenge. Blake vowed to destroy all who did or had carried the mantle of Thor. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd and you love obscure Thor villains, be sure to let us know by clicking that like button on this video. Thumbs up. Number 9. King Laufey. Laufey is known for being the leader of the Giants of Jotunheim. In fact, he is technically Loki's biological father, with his wife Farbauti being Loki's birth mother. Laufey hasn't made too many appearances, and this could be because although he is a giant and you'd think he would be a massive threat as the king of all the Giants of Jotunheim, he actually doesn't seem to be that tough. Multiple times Laufey has been defeated and killed, and multiple times he's returned, only to be defeated again. Thor has even prevented Laufey from being resurrected in the past as well. So, while he is a fearsome foe to behold with a lot of sway and loyal followers, he probably hasn't made too many appearances because, well, half the time he's usually busy being dead. In fact, I'd say more than half the time he's pretty dead. Number 8. Serpent. Cull Borson is likely a villain who would be less well known by classic comics fans who have since fallen off reading, or just anyone who might not be as up to date on their modern comics or, only started reading modern comics in recent years. Cull Borson made his first appearance in part of the Fear Itself event, appearing in issue number 1. He was introduced as the god of fear, Odin's brother, who was the rightful ruler of the 9 realms, at least initially, the Allfather prior to Odin. However, due to the fact that he did not keep his word when it came to listening to his brother's counsel once he became Allfather, and also chose to rule with fear, he ended up being usurped. Odin could not bring himself to kill his brother and so decided to seal him away deep beneath the ocean. Typical Odin move in my opinion. The reason we never saw Cull until 2011 in the comics was because of his origins, with him being imprisoned for eons. He only emerged during Fear Itself, but was of course defeated and later was killed again during War of the Realms. He's definitely spent more time dead than alive in regards to Thor's overall narrative in the comics. Number 7. All Black. While Gorr is likely well known now thanks to his appearance in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the MCU, the All Black has yet to be introduced to us yet. Nor its creator, Null. These two characters might be more elusive to fans who have not dived deep into the well of comics. The All Black is basically like Venom, a symbiote, and in fact the first symbiote ever created by Null, the god of symbiotes. The All Black Necrosword ended up being retrieved a long time ago by Gorr, the God Butcher. Well, Gorr and then he became the God Butcher, who used the All Black as an instrument of vengeance, possibly even becoming corrupted by its dark influence somewhat, because that's kind of a thing it does. He used the sword to defeat the gods in an effort to rid the universe of gods entirely, which is how the All Black became the enemy of Thor. Eventually, the All Black bonded fully with Gorr, allowing him to resurrect even after he was killed. Both the All Black and Gorr would be defeated by a team of Thors, but the symbiotic sword would later return in the future when King Thor was also faced with fighting Galactus. Thor would actually use the All Black in the fight, joining with it, and it would use him to get to Galactus, who the All Black would later bond with, turning Galactus from the Devourer of Worlds into the Butcher of Worlds. Number 6. Curse. Curse is Algrim the Strong. He was one of the Dark Elves who served Malekith, but was later betrayed by him. Due to the extent of his injuries, however, Curse cannot quite remember exactly what had really happened to leave him in such a fatal state, leaving him to believe that Thor was fully to blame, with Thor being the only person who he could remember was really involved at all. Curse's hatred for Thor was so powerful that the Beyonder sensed it and paid Curse a visit, deciding to grant him immense strength in addition to healing him. As such, Algrim became even stronger than ever and adopted the mantle of Curse, setting out to hunt down Thor. However, Curse would later remember the truth of Malekith's involvement in his initial demise and would later turn on him instead. Because yeah, Malekith kinda messed him up there. Number 5. The Midgard Serpent. While Jormungand is known for being an iconic Thor villain in terms of mythos, the serpent does not appear that much. In fact, Cull Borson's serpent, Thor's uncle, is probably more well known as a villain, and even he only really showed up a few years ago in the comics, first appearing just over a decade ago in 2011 in Fear Itself. Oddly enough, although not his uncle, Jormungand is another serpent who also happens to be related to Thor as well, being rumored to be his nephew, the son of Loki and Angrboda, both frost giants. Because Jormungand was believed to be a future threat to the gods of Asgard, he was banished, sent to the depths of the ocean on Earth, becoming known as the Midgard Serpent, with Midgard being the name that Asgard uses for the realm of Earth. And that's apparently where serpents go. Number 4. Curse. There is not only one curse, but actually two in the comics. For a time, Lady Waziria took over as the new curse. Initially, she was a dark elf who, after being betrayed by Malekith herself, became his enemy, seeking revenge against him. As such, she joined up with the League of Realms, heroes from the 9 realms who had banded together to hunt down and apprehend Malekith. There's the 10 realms now, but it might have been the 9 realms only at that time. Later, Malekith would actually capture Waziria and force her to become the new curse, taking Algrim's place. However, she was only cursed for a few years, from 2017 to 2019 in the comics, so some might not remember this, and considering how Curse is pretty much fully covered, some may have not even known that this version of the villain was Lady Waziria herself, because we don't really see much of her face or anything. Number 3. those who sit above in shadow. To really understand the cycle of death and rebirth and why it happens is to know those who sit above in shadow. At least the cycle of death and rebirth as it applies to the Asgardians and the Norse gods. And also you have to be pretty deep in the Thor mythos to know of those controlling villains. They are beings who apparently orchestrate the death and rebirth of the gods, feeding off the energy of mass destruction and world devastating events like Ragnarok. Thor himself was actually a part of Odin's plan to defeat those who sit above in shadow, which was shown to have succeeded, but then later was revealed to have not completely worked. Or to have completely worked, but then those who sit above in shadow, I guess, simply returned afterwards. You know how it is. Number 2. Siedring the Merciless. Siedring the Merciless only made a few appearances in the comics. Less than a handful, I believe. Siedring was initially one of the members of All-Father Odin's council. However, after Odin learned that Thor had revealed his true identity to Jane Foster, he decided to take away Thor's power as a punishment. Y'all know Odin, for years, was not a fan of Jane Foster. He definitely did not ship Thor and Jane together. But Odin could not bring himself to take Thor's power, and so had Siedring do it for him. However, Siedring became ambitious as a result of the newfound power coursing through his veins. Rather than pass it on to Odin, as he was, supposed to do, he instead became an adversary of both Odin and Thor by attempting to usurp Odin, take over Asgard, and become the new Allfather instead. Number 1. Replicas. Replicas only appeared in one single issue, both making their debut in issue 141 of Thor, but also seeing their demise in the very same issue. I love a one-shot villain. Although I would say Replicas represented the real danger in this issue, Replicas was not alone when it came to their villainy. In fact, Replicas, also known as Replica Model X3, was actually an android created by the alien inventor Chutta. Chutta's secret mission was to prepare Earth for an invasion, and they created Replicas in the hopes of creating chaos on the planet's surface. The mob boss, Slugger Sykes, what a name, hoped to use Replicas, going into business with Chutta in the hopes of acquiring his own personal army of androids. However, when Slugger learned of Chutta's true intent, it put the two villains behind Replicas at odds with one another, and instead they kind of turned on each other. Slugger lives on Earth, so he was like, I'm an Earth person, and I think you wanting to mess us up. Not so cool, Chutta. Even for me, a mob boss.
Number 10. The Red Barbarian. What better sign of the times than having an increasingly stereotypically generic communist Russian general as a villain? At least they gave him a unique name. The Red Barbarian was a general in the USSR army named Andrei Rostov, and along with his generic name, he was generically evil, wore generic medals on his generic brown fatigues, and drank a lot of very generic Russian party beverages. The Barbarian never really even engaged Stark directly. He mainly sent incredibly generic spies to go and steal some generic plans from the guy. And to just add to the icing on the cake, when the one interesting spy, the actor, managed to actually succeed in his mission, Andrei didn't believe him and had taken him out. Andrei did not believe him and had him taken out. He eventually just became another generic Russian guy taken out by the Winter Soldier. What a waste. Number 9. The Freak. Some of you may be surprised to learn that the Freak was actually Iron Man's best buddy, Happy Hogan. In some earlier Iron Man stories, Happy Hogan accidentally absorbs a large dose of cobalt radiation thanks to the Unnervator. This made him several times more powerful, which I gotta let you know is not how that works. Please do not irradiate yourself for superpowers. It will not go well. Nevertheless, in this form, he could discharge blasts of cobalt energy from his hands, had superhuman durability and strength, even becoming bulletproof, and he continuously radiated lethal levels of radiation which could have resulted in a nuclear explosion. Unfortunately, he was also just cray with this power, turning him into the Freak. Iron Man chased him and managed to lure him to his factory, where he tricked him into walking into a maximum power burst of the Innervation intensifier, hoping it would turn him back to Happy Hogan, which it did. Number 8. The Unicorn. The Unicorn suffers from having probably the least threatening of names, and honestly, when he first appeared in Tales of Suspense number 56 in May of 1964, Milos Masaryk, which is how I'm hoping you pronounce that, was just a Soviet agent assigned to security duty for a bigger bad, Anton Vanko, who eventually became the Crimson Dynamo. Dynamo's second finished project was a helmet with radiation beam weaponry called a Power Horn. Vanko offered this invention to Masaryk and taught him how to use it. So yeah, the unicorn was essentially another villain's lackey, but he did eventually get enhanced with superhuman strength and stamina, not to mention near impenetrable skin. He also eventually turned the helmet weaponry somehow into a third eye that can fire energy beams. It looked much cooler, I'll agree, but he was kinda crazy and he still kept on just being muscle for other villains, last of which would be Korvac. Number 7. Mr. Doll. Look, sometimes Marvel had to get really creative in their earlier days. They were still figuring out what worked and what didn't. I'm not saying that Mr. Doll, aka Nathan Dawley, who appeared in Tales of Suspense number 48 in 1963, didn't work. Okay, yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying actually. Yeah. The concept is actually quite a familiar one, almost like it's been done before by another comic book company. Dwarf Dolly came into possession of what was essentially a voodoo doll that could be shaped into whoever he intended the victim to be, and he got really good at reshaping it, using the doll to inflict pain on businessmen until they handed over their companies to Dolly himself. He came into conflict with Iron Man and he did actually defeat the hero the first time, but we all know that isn't going to last, and somehow Iron Man used an energy blast to make the doll resemble Nathan himself, and the villain's attack backfired. He then got his mind implanted into two mannequins who took themselves after the Brothers Grimm, and I don't think any of us were expecting that one. Not at all. Number 6. Gargantus. Gargantus was Iron Man's first real opponent after his origin story in number 39 of Tales of Suspense. For the follow-up, number 40, Marvel decided that his next adversary would be a gigantic robotic Neanderthal constructed by aliens who traveled to Earth 80,000 years ago. I guess these Goomba-looking aliens saw Neanderthals and thought that would make an excellent robot. And for those nearly 80,000 years, they didn't change the robot one bit, because when two of those aliens came to Earth in the modern day, they brought the club-wielding Gargantus with them to lead the attack. Now, he did have mesmerizing abilities, which he used to force the citizens of Granville to build a wall around the city. Unfortunately though, for Gargantus, one of those citizens had a literal date with Tony Stark, and so he went to investigate, eventually defeating the robot with incredibly powerful magnets that ripped it apart. Number 5. Spymaster. While other obscure villains tread into the realm of ridiculous and hilarious, Ted Calloway, or Spymaster, is just plain awesome. He has actually been a thorn in the side of Tony Stark, breaking into Stark Tower multiple times. In one arc, he was the one who put together a team of other underutilized Iron Man rogues, including our buddy Unicorn, and breaking into Stark Tower, stealing some of Stark's tech. He was even able to steal tech for Justin Hammer, which was the spark for the awesome Armor Wars story arc. He has eluded capture multiple times and even let the world believe he was passed away while he continued to operate in the shadows. Despite first appearing in 1971, he's just kind of always remained relatively unknown to the common audience member, and I think that's gotta change. Number 4. Dread Knight. Bram Velsing, for starters, has an incredibly strange name that is a very obvious reference to Bram Stoker and his character Van Helsing. But he is also not actually an Iron Man villain, not on Earth 616 at least. Bram Velsing, or Dread Knight, is really an enemy to Tony Stark in the Ultimate Universe. Unfortunately, in the 1610 universe, he just kind of becomes another Iron Man villain that creates an Iron Man-like armor. But in Earth 616, he is actually a Latverian scientist who didn't like Dr. Doom's schemes and was punished by having a mask fused to his face. He became kind of like a villain to Dr. Doom in a way, allying himself with Victoria Frankenstein and the creations of Victor Frankenstein. He has fought Iron Man on a few occasions in 616 as well, but he's also fought Black Knight and Spider-Man. And I mean, an armored up man with a cool mask wielding a super cool lance riding a black winged horse? It's actually pretty cool. Number 3. Controller. I don't know what it is about Iron Man, but so many of his villains, even the obscure ones, are actually really neat. Granted, some are just dudes in suits, but what's cool is that for the most part they are other scientists or regular dudes who elevate themselves to something more. Controller is a prime example. Basil Sandhurst developed himself an exoskeleton to allow him to move and function after a terrible chemical accident. But with this tech, he also developed the ability to siphon and use the mental energy of others to control them and read their minds. Eventually, this technological ability became one he just possessed on his own, and it's caused him to go up against some real heavy hitters, including different iterations of Captain Marvel. But he will always hold a feud against Iron Man, Tony Stark, for all the times the Golden Avenger has defeated him. Number 2. Arsenal. Arsenal may actually be known to Iron Man readers. Originally, Arsenal was actually a creation of Howard Stark, Tony's father. It was a prototype robot weapon created by Howard during the Cold War. Now there are actually 2, Arsenal Alpha and Arsenal Beta, but we will mainly be talking about Beta. What makes this villain more imposing for Tony himself is the fact that Arsenal Beta's neural processors were based on Howard himself. Plus, he had a sophisticated guidance AI named Mistress, which was actually based on engrams of Tony's mother, Maria. Arsenal contains both Tony's mom and dad, huge influences in his life, making any battle with Arsenal a much more personal one. More recently, Howard and Maria, or Arsenal and Mistress, were both uploaded to Tony's E-scape, and thanks to Arno Stark, they were even given human forms, but unfortunately they will never truly be Tony's parents. And in at number 1 is Madame Mask. Yes, I know she isn't really the most obscure, but she is cool as hell, and not everyone knows about Guiletta Nefaria. Nefaria, working under her father, Count Lucino Nefaria, became the leader of the massive Magia crime family, and in one of her first moments she actually attempted to infiltrate Stark Industries by charming Jasper Sitwell. Only, she actually ended up getting feelings for him and then got into an accident that disfigured her, which is when she got the golden mask that granted her the name Madame Mask. She has remained a villain to Iron Man for a long time, playing a bit more of a hands-on part, although behind the scenes in Dark Reign and Secret Invasion, which is where she developed a relationship with the villain, the Hood. She remained a decent level threat for a long time, even fighting Moon Knight and Hawkeye, and there was also a point where she acquired a number of magical artifacts that gave her actual power outside of the Magia. Thanks to her less than ideal relationships with Midas, Jasper Sitwell, Tony Stark, and her own father, plus her incredibly hard childhood and facial disfigurement, she is an incredibly compelling character with depth many other somewhat obscure villains just can't match.